A larger-than-life businessman gunned down in his office.
But will the discovery of his secret double life lead to the killer? An all-new 2020 starts right now.
So in broad daylight, a man is shot dead in his place of business on a busy street.
I knew as soon as I saw it. I knew he was gone.
Just 2 blocks behind me, Bob Eidman was found robbed and murdered.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times. That 3rd shot is being an execution.
I just all the way there saying, no, 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 Bob, no, Bob.
There were just floods and floods of police cars coming in and just total chaos.
We're with the Major Case Squad.
They only have 5 days, so the clock is ticking.
Diane found out on the site that her husband had been murdered.
Yes, she did.
She makes this statement, something like this has happened before.
There were numerous individuals who could have done something such as this.
He asked me a question that just kind of floored me. He said, "We're trying to find out about your brother's lifestyle."
What is it like to all of a sudden learn that there's this whole other secret part of his life?
People are going to find out some stuff they're probably not going to like.
June 8th, 2007 was a typical day in St. Charles. It was a sunny day, and I was proceeding southwest here on First Capitol Drive.
So it was about to break 80 degrees on this Friday morning around 11 a.m. And as Officer Dean Meyer's patrol car is making its way toward Interstate 70, a mail carrier was on her rounds too. This security video showing her dropping off mail at a strip mall grocery store, then driving her truck a few doors down to enter the office where Bob Eidman sold car insurance. Nobody heard her first scream.
Our mail carrier was running up the street, and she was flailing her arms, and she was yelling for the police.
Deborah Kennedy was the first person to hear those desperate cries and tried to catch up with her as the mail carrier ran into traffic on the busy road before Officer Meyer spotted her.
I saw the mail carrier running up the hill with the phone in her hand.
Stop, please stop! There's a man, I'm delivering the mail right now, he's lying on the floor with blood all over him.
I asked what's going on, and she said Bob was laying on the floor and he had blood on his face.
And she tries to investigate what's going on. She goes into Bob's office and gets the shock of her life.
I went inside to see if I could help him. And when I walked in, there was plenty of blood. I watched his chest didn't move. I knew as soon as I saw it. I knew he was gone. Let me breathe for a second.
It was St. Charles's first murder of 2007. And right from the start, it was the kind of thing that just isn't supposed to happen here. That's because St. Charles, Missouri is an idyllic bedroom community. It's just over the bridge from St. Louis with a historic downtown and historic values as well. I guess the idea is that you're supposed to shed the stress of the big city as you come across the wide Missouri River and land here. But as we know, money woes, lies and rage and desperation, the grip of fear, they do not stop at the river's edge.
Now we've got a whole team of officers from the St. Charles Police Department. They've converged on the scene of Bob Eidman's murder.
There were just, floods and floods of police cars coming in and just total chaos.
Immediately I responded to the area, to the scene. Bob is laying on the floor between the 2 desks. He's laying on his back, and there's a pool of blood around his head.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times. The first shot was superficial. It was a grazing wound to his chin. The second shot was to his neck, shoulder area, which knocked him down.
According to St. Charles homicide detective Don Stepp, the third and fatal shot had been fired through Bob Eidman's left eye as the assailant stood over his prone body.
I would definitely classify that third shot as being an execution.
This was an insurance office, and it was a fairly open area. We collected bullet casings, bullets, bullet fragments. We would mark the position, set up little yellow tents called photo markers. We would photograph it. We dusted for fingerprints. You're hoping that maybe you will find one fingerprint that may lead to a particular suspect.
Police are seeking out anyone who might have spotted something that morning in Bob's office. With her office directly below Bob's, Deborah Kennedy didn't see anyone, but she might have heard something.
I think it was probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. A friend of mine had come in. You know, I heard a couple noises, and we both kind of looked at each other, and then I heard a big thud on my ceiling. And we're kind of like, what the heck, is Bob doing up there? And so, being the way I am, I yelled up through the rafters, hey, Bob, keep it down. I'm trying to work down here.
We came to the conclusion that those loud bangs that she heard was the gunshots in Bob's office.
Police quickly worked to gather information about the victim. His name is Bob Eidman. He's 48 years old. He was married for a very long time, had no children, and worked in the insurance industry.
But just recently, like the past 2 years, had just started this new company. He'd got like a franchise. He just started that on his own.
As news begins to spread that something bad has happened at Bob's office, concerned friends and associates in the insurance business, they rush to the site, like the longtime colleague who asked that we call her Dana. What made you want to go over there?
That's my friend. I wanted to make sure he was okay. I remember locking up my office. I had a client in there, and she saw how distraught I was. And I'm just in the car, just all the way there saying, no, no, Bob.
What happened when you got there?
Of course, they're spectators, so someone said that someone got shot. Didn't see Bob, didn't see him waving in the window, didn't see any sign of him at all. And then when they took his body out of the office, we knew it was Bob's body because he was a big guy.
What's that moment like?
Oh my goodness. It was the worst.
Local reporters have arrived on the scene as well. Those reporters noticed that a woman pulls up, and it turns out that she is the now widow of Robert Eidman. Her name is Diane, and Diane approaches the reporters, asking them if they know what's happening. And the reporters are saying that they feel uncomfortable telling her about her husband, so they direct her to the police.
But Diane said that she hadn't heard from Bob all day, which was odd, and she kept trying to call him, and he never answered the office phone. So when she shows up and seen all the police cars, she knew something had happened, and she identified herself.
Diane found out on the site, didn't she, that her husband had been murdered?
Yes, she did.
As investigators comb the area looking for video of any potential suspects, they happen upon this grocery store just a few doors down from Bob Eidman's office. Inside, they take note of the security camera that captured the mail carrier earlier that morning. It was right about there, pointed directly towards the front door. Once they get a look at the video it recorded, it's the first big break in the case.
Police believe Eidman was working alone when someone walked inside his business, fatally shot him, then took off.
Insurance agent Bob Eidman is dead, shot to death in his office along a busy thoroughfare near the interstate in St. Charles, Missouri.
We are west of the city of St. Louis, which most people kind of relate that to the arch.
They are just separated by a river, so just hop on the bridge and you're in St. Charles.
And like this town's famous Christmas tradition celebration and their lively Oktoberfest, murder comes but once a year.
St. Charles averages about 1.5 homicides a year.
It's a pretty peaceful community, and people look out for each other.
Cold-blooded murder is not something St. Charles is known for, and the local cops will probably need some help with what looks like a big investigation. So they appeal to a special group for help.
A request was made to notify the Major Case Squad.
And they contact other departments that are in our area, and they send detectives to assist us.
More than 30 detectives with the Major Case Squad are now looking for his killer.
This elite Major Case Squad has a very high rate of success. 80% of their cases are solved. But with all this manpower, there's one catch. They only have 5 days to get the job done. So the clock is ticking.
They're coming from all other agencies. At some point, they need to get back to theirs.
The police canvassed First Capitol right there in front of the shop.
How you doing?
Hi, what's up?
We're with the Major Case Squad, and we're investigating a homicide that happened here Friday afternoon.
Asking, did you notice something on June 7th?
And then you can see in the distance those apartment houses. You talked to all the people who lived in those apartment houses too, didn't you?
Every door was knocked on multiple times until we got contact.
And could one part of Bob Eidman's line of work have put him in jeopardy?
Robert Eidman's specialty in the insurance company was dealing with high-risk drivers, individuals that could not get insurance through traditional places, people that had prior traffic violations.
He wasn't taking checks because apparently those had been bounced, and this was back in the day when checks were a thing.
But his good friend and insurance colleague Dana, she felt Bob was taking too great a risk with the form of payment he did take.
So he would accept cash against a lot of people who advised him not to take cash.
Though he was known for accepting cash, he doesn't have a safe. Instead, police learned Bob would put the cash he received from clients into a far less secure place.
There was a drawer in Bob's desk that was locked, and you'd have to use a screwdriver to manipulate the lock to be able to open it.
When police managed to open the drawer and they checked the cash box, oh, there's money inside, about $200.
There was no forced entry, but it could have absolutely been a robbery. I know one of the things they were looking for was Bob's wallet missing.
And you're looking for anywhere that somebody might have thrown something, like Bob Eidman's wallet.
From the top of the roof, all through the grass, ditches, sewers, everywhere. We could not find the wallet. The wallet's going to be 90% of the time in a man's back pocket.
And to get that wallet out, you would have had to struggle between the wallet and the inside of the pants, which caused some friction. I recommended that we cut the pants pockets out and send them to the crime lab. We just thought maybe a sample of skin cells could be found inside Bob's pocket.
When we touch something or brush up against something, some of our DNA is transferred to the other object. If they're located, those skin cells can be broken down into DNA.
So you were checking for DNA everywhere else, but this was just kind of out of the blue. You just thought, well, you know, we might as well give this a try.
Yes, sir. It was the first time that I'd ever heard of anybody's pants pockets getting cut out.
While one team is feverishly working to gather physical evidence, another team is talking to anyone they can find, talking to family, friends, anything that will help them glean information about Bob Eidman.
Bob was a big teddy bear. He was friendly, he was bubbly. He called me wild woman. I think it has something to do with my hair. It grew on me.
Bob was a funny little guy, and I say little meaning that I think he was probably about 5'4", 5'6".
If we were going to say what size personality he had, like small to large, where would you put him on the scale there, Pam?
I'd say extra large.
His persona was just so, hey, you guys see me? I'm here.
How would you describe his relationship to authority growing up?
Not good. He defied authority with regularity. He had to go to summer school every summer. In fact, my parents tried to bribe him and said, hey, if you can graduate from high school in 4 years, we'll give you a car. He's like, show me the car first.
We were in high school together. Bob was pretty forward. He liked to talk to the ladies and hang out and visit. Then he met Diane, and he fell in love with her, and they were real close.
I believe Diane and Bobby made a fantastic couple. I really liked Diane. She'd put Bobby in his place. Bobby say something smart, she'd say something smart right back at him.
She was taller than him. I don't think it really mattered to him at all.
He ended up getting some lifts, so he felt like he was as tall as his wife.
Bob and Diane had been married for 20 plus years. They did not have any children.
So instead, his office featured photos of the muscle cars that he loved, while under his desk, he kept a copy of the Dream Girls CD. He finally got to be his own boss, but there were great challenges, weren't there?
Yeah, he started talking like, well, the business isn't doing so good. I haven't had that many people come in.
He kept saying, you know, if I don't make this in the next couple months, I'm not sure.
I might go under.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it.
Think about all that financial stress. At least one person thinks it was taking a terrible toll.
I thought he committed suicide.
You thought he was so despondent that he might have taken his own life.
I did.
Remember that video camera in the grocery store next to Bob's, pointing toward the street in front? Police have been poring over the footage, and now they may have found something of interest. There, that white car.
At 10:50 a.m., you see the vehicle drive past the front doors, and 4 minutes later, you see it drive past the front doors, I believe a little slower, and almost like creeping along looking for something.
Was this driver making sure the coast was clear?
It wasn't the greatest picture, I remember that. It's always frustrating when you can't identify the people inside the vehicle.
One thing we can tell is a white four-door vehicle. Luckily,
I'm impressed you can tell it's a four-door vehicle. It looks like a white car. But it turned out the small St. Charles Police Department had a car maven.
we have an individual at the time that could almost identify almost any type of vehicle. He was a big car guy. He said it was a Ford Focus.
Like, I like cars, but honestly, wow.
We're kind of looking at this several different ways. Is he having problems with a customer with a white Ford Focus?
The bad news is that in St. Charles County, there are 1,300 Ford Focuses. In the state of Missouri, there are 5,000.
5,000 is a big number to have to deal with.
But they're not finding anything suspicious until a gift-wrapped lead suddenly falls into their lap. A white car is crashed and abandoned nearby. And get this about the driver.
He had bloody clothing on. Why has he got Bob's business card? I hope this is it.
A mail carrier found Eidman's body shot several times inside his Brook Auto Insurance agency at about 12:30 Friday afternoon.
So in broad daylight, a man is shot dead in his place of business on a busy street. I'm sure it did strike fear.
I don't understand why somebody would kill somebody right here.
It was such a senseless killing that nobody really understood what was going on.
I didn't want to go back to work the next morning. I wanted to get the heck out of Dodge. I wanted to get out of town.
Police here in St. Charles, Missouri still had no motive, no witnesses, and no way to quell the rising fear of the St. Charles community. Fear and anxiety that grew even more after 3 men broke into a bowling alley, took $700, and tied up the janitor in the process.
2 men wearing masks and carrying guns rob a St. Charles bowling alley.
Well, here is proof they had a gun, a bullet hole left in the office windows. They busted in through the back door, shot up the office, tried to shoot open a safe.
Geographically, it was just down the street from Brooks Insurance.
And it was a bowling alley that we all bowled at, so at first we all thought it was tied together.
So people wondered if there was a connection between the 2 robberies.
And we looked at that, seeing if they were connected. And in the course of that investigation, we were able to eliminate it from being a part of this case.
Police are knee-deep in Bob Eidman's murder investigation, and they come upon a really interesting scene. It's an abandoned, crashed white car. And when they track down the owner, well, there's a couple of really eye-popping pieces of information.
He had bloody clothing on, and he also had one of Robert Eidman's business cards. Why does he have bloody clothing? Is it his blood? Is it Bob's blood? We have some questions we need answered. This could be it.
It blew my mind, like, whoa.
Travis Wade Ensley is about to blow a lot of minds at police headquarters, where leads in Bob Eidman's murder have been hard to come by.
The car that I wrecked was a white four-door Saturn.
Which might have looked like the car that was captured on the footage.
The next thing I know, I'm at St. Charles Police Station getting questioned for murder.
Police now feel that he has a lot of explaining to do. So as Travis recalls, his story goes kind of something like this.
I needed new insurance on my car. My buddy's like, check this guy out, and called him up, gave me good rates. And then like a week later, I had been out, had a couple drinks. Okay. I wound up wrecking my car right by my apartment. My airbags deployed and it knocked the sense out of me, and I like staggered down the hill, like right to my apartment, didn't remember nothing.
Okay.
Next day, I woke up, I walk out my door, my car's not there.
So Travis calls police to report his car as stolen, but then is stunned to suddenly find himself a potential person of interest in a murder.
I was scared to death.
They were coming at you.
Yeah, they were coming at me pretty good.
Travis has what seems like a likely story about why there's blood on a shirt. He said that when he crashed his car, he got a bloody nose. Cops will check out his story, so they're not quite ready to clear him.
And they went and looked into certain, my alibi and this and that. They're like, okay, yeah, he's not the guy.
Now, police turn their attention closer to home, to Bob Eidman's widow, Diane. It is quite routine for police to look at the spouse of someone who's been murdered.
When Bob's wife, Diane, was advised that Bob had been murdered in his office, she didn't have a great reaction.
While Diane does appear to be upset in this photo, some detectives at the scene felt she was not overly emotional.
I don't want to say it didn't seem like a surprise to her, but she wasn't reacting in a manner that I thought a wife would react when they found out their husband was shot.
That struck me, and I'm sure several detectives, as unusual.
Is she in shock? Is she in denial? Is she involved in this?
Then there's Detective Stephanie Kaiser. Already a veteran sex crimes investigator, Kaiser was respected for her sensitivity and understanding with victims.
That would be completely normal in a shock situation like that. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all when you're talking about trauma, because to be able to process that would take some time. They're moving slow, they can't think, so I make nothing of that behavior.
Now Detective Kaiser is about to become the St. Charles Police Department's Diane Whisperer.
Diane Eidman became my lead. Right. We were assigned to take her from, sadly, the scene.
Diane wants to go to Bob's parents' home so that she can break the terrible news to them. And during that ride, Diane talks about how she is the manager of the kitchen at the local hospital, and she also offers more information about her beloved husband.
She said that there was financial problems.
When you say financial problems, what do you mean?
I mean, they were having a tough time paying bills. According to Diane, there wasn't much cash coming in. The business itself was struggling.
Detective Kaiser continues talking with Diane, and she makes a note that Diane seems incredibly forgetful. She can't remember her own Social Security number. And then the detective asks her about any existing insurance policies.
She was upfront that, yes, I have a life insurance policy through work.
Diane initially gave us an answer that she thought they had a couple of small policies, approximately $5,000.
Not much, right?
Not much.
So Diane was pretty direct with me. I think she'd had a lot of questions asked of her and then just kind of tells me boldly, I did not do this.
These conversations with Diane will shape and reshape the police investigation into Bob Eidman's murder. At the end of that first day, Diane sounds like every other resident of St. Charles. She is terribly afraid.
It's just dawning on her, wait, I'm not safe either. I have to act to get her extra patrol, and I did. But you have to still go where the evidence leads.
And no one knows yet where that evidence will lead, especially in the wake of the very first astonishing story that Diane Eidman tells Detective Kaiser, with words that will be ringing in lots of heads at police headquarters.
One of the first things she says is, don't take this as a confession or anything, but this happened to my dad too. Has her father been murdered and her husband murdered as well? Has lightning struck this woman twice?
Now, Detective Kaiser was reeling from the incredible story that Diane had just told her.
She makes this statement, don't take this as a confession, but something like this has happened before. And I'm not quoting Diane at this point, but somebody broke into the house and shot my dad. So when I asked, did they catch the person?
How did she answer that question?
She said, they thought my mom shot my dad.
And we're wondering if lightning had struck twice in the same place.
Diane Bowling Eidman, seen here on her wedding day in 1978 with her father Jerome, was just 26 years old when he was murdered inside the home he shared with his wife Lenore, Diane's mother. The murder case that made headlines in this region all began when a call came through in the wee hours on the morning of April 6, 1984. Gordon Adams was an officer with the St. Louis County PD. What went out over the radio when you heard the call?
As I recall, like I say, it came out as a home invasion with someone shot. And so that's what we would consider a hot call. Well, when I arrived, it's 2:30 in the morning, maybe 2:35. So it's dark as can be. I immediately went to the door, knocked on the door, and Lenore answered. And the hair is pristine, and she's standing there in a kind of sheer nightgown. And she says, my husband needs help. He's in the bedroom. He's been shot.
What are you thinking when you're hearing this story for the first time?
I mean, she didn't strike you as a woman who woke up in the middle of the night to find her husband murdered. No tears. The hair was all done. And I'm trying to get information for my report. And she actually lit up a cigarette. And I'm thinking, this is your husband. He's just been murdered. She didn't have any emotion at all, almost.
David Barron was a detective with the St. Louis County Police assigned to the case. So Lenore Bowling was asserting that an intruder had come into the house, somehow found her husband's service revolver, used that service revolver to kill him, and then left.
That's what she was saying.
How did that strike you as a plausible story, given your years of experience in law enforcement?
It was an improbable set of circumstances. And to throw into that, the garage door was open about a foot.
Okay, that garage door over there was open a foot.
And the inside garage door, leading it from the garage into the house, is the only door in the house that did not have a deadbolt.
Diane's mother had told police she believed she was being stalked in the days prior to the shooting by a black male driving a black car who'd been leaving notes at their home. And there was a note found at the crime scene.
Well, the last note that was found at the scene said, "This is for you, pig, for what you did to me." No, I made a canvass later on in the neighborhood. No one saw a black male in a black car dressed in all black.
Lenore Bowling was charged with the murder of her husband. She pled not guilty, and while she was awaiting trial, she moved in with Bob and Diane.
How did Bob feel about living with someone who was accused of shooting her husband to death?
Bob was not happy about that.
He was scared.
Yeah,
he would go to bed every night and say would bolt his door, lock it closed. He did not. He was afraid. He didn't want to be in the house with her.
After that fateful night, this saga ending here in the fall of 1985. Diane Eidman's mother, Lenore Bowling, on trial for capital murder in the death of her husband, Diane's father, Jerome Bowling. Lenore Bowling found not guilty of her husband's murder.
They did not believe that she did it. They believed her story.
The irony not lost on investigators as Diane Eidman, more than 20 years later, now a person of interest
in a different killing.
Has her father been murdered and her husband murdered as well? What a weird set of circumstances.
But it was something else Diane Eidman told investigators about her own husband that they said gave them pause.
During Diane's initial interview, she was asked if there was any insurance policies. Diane said that she thought there was one policy, and she thought it was just a small policy, approximately $5,000.
She describes that she has a life insurance policy through work. She's not sure about the details on that.
I was contacted by an insurance company and told that there was additional policies for Robert Eidman that we were not made aware of that were quite substantial in size.
Now with Bob's death, police say she was suddenly in line to receive more than $300,000 in life insurance.
We did not know if Diane had forgotten to tell us about those policies. Did Diane know about those policies?
And as they start looking deeper into Bob Eidman, they make a mind-blowing discovery. This man was leading a double life.
And then the commander of the major case squad asked me a question that just kind of floored me. I had no idea.
I went to Bob's funeral, and it was sad to see him there. I didn't expect to go see my friend in a casket, and I felt horrible for his wife and his family.
Bob's older brother by 21 months. Glenn Eidman grew up as a straight-A student, and he was a frequent target of Bob's verbal barbs. How did he feel about you being a policeman?
He made fun of me a lot. He did not like that. Wasn't big on police. He got in trouble growing up.
Glenn always believed that Bob was his mother's favorite. Even so, he said he was not prepared for what he says she asked him to do as they attended Bob's funeral.
At his funeral, my mom was confined to a wheelchair. She was in very poor health. So she goes, "How could somebody do this to my boy?" I said, "Mom, I don't know. I don't know why." She goes, "Well, I want you to find those people. I want you to kill them." And I said, "That's not how this works. You know, I'm a police officer. I can't do something like that." But she was very devastated, and literally 3 months after his death, she died.
She has lost her will to live.
It was kind of a rough year, for sure.
I went up to the funeral and seen Diane, and she was broken up, but I didn't ask a lot of questions.
She never really said a whole lot. She really didn't say a lot about anything. She was pretty quiet.
I was just watching Diane and just grieving with her. And I noticed there was a large police presence, and I just thought that was odd for a funeral. But if they suspect the murderers to be there, then they were there for a reason.
At the time of Robert Eidman's funeral, we set up surveillance and we recorded video of the attendees at the funeral, as well as obtaining the guest book for the services.
Police check out every name on the funeral registry. It takes them nowhere. Meanwhile, it's day 4 of the Major Crimes Task Force investigation. The clock is ticking, but still no good leads on who killed Bob Eidman.
We were striking out. There was no one that could really come up and say, Bob's having a problem with anyone.
But then the Major Case Squad does a deep dive into Bob's email, his phone and computer records. They're searching for any hidden clues. They make a discovery they're eager to know a lot more about, just as Glenn comes in for his interview.
You know, they put me in an interview room to ask me some questions. I said, you know, I have nothing to hide. You don't have to play these games. You know, ask me whatever you want. And he asked me a question that just kind of floored me. He said, we're trying to find out about your brother's alternative lifestyle. I said, what alternative? He goes, his affairs. You know, I go, you think he's out picking up women? I mean, he, you know, that just ain't happening. And he's like, your brother was gay. I had no idea.
We had no idea.
We did not know that.
Turns out this long-married insurance agent was leading a secret double life.
While we were analyzing Bob's computers and it was discovered that he was visiting male-on-male websites were sexual in nature, and he was making contact with some of these places. Sometimes in these murder investigations, as we dig into them, you find a lot about a person's life, their lifestyle.
When you have a secret, what vulnerability does that give someone like Bob Eidman?
Anytime somebody has a secret and somebody knows it, and you're keeping it a secret for a reason, people can use that as leverage to get their way if they want to blackmail you or extort you.
As investigators continue searching through Bob's phone records, they find something else noteworthy. One phone number keeps popping up, belonging to a man from out of town.
They had an intimate relationship. They would rent a hotel room somewhere and visit each other. Automatically, a flag gets raised.
What is it like to all of a sudden learn that there's this whole other secret part of his life that you knew nothing about?
It was upsetting. I guess I felt he should have been able to talk to somebody about that. He shouldn't have had to hide that life. He shouldn't have had to lie. Having a relationship and being gay that's just part of life. And I wish he would have been able to share that with us.
How you doing?
Police bring in this secret lover for questioning. They can't help but wonder, would this man have a reason to murder Bob? And what about Diane? Could his existence have set her into a murderous rage?
We've altered the man's voice.
People are going to find out some stuff they're probably not going to like.
Feelings can run wild with someone. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. It gives people motive.
And as a young, untested detective is taking on his very first big murder case, a totally unexpected assist from the cutting edge of forensic science, it's going to take this investigation into surprising territory and bring answers at last to the key question: why was Bob Eidman killed?
It blew my mind when the results came back. It was the golden ticket. This is what we were looking for.
Two blocks behind me, Bob Eidman was found robbed and murdered. Diane found out on the site that her husband had been murdered.
Yes, she did.
She makes this statement, something like this has happened before. Somebody broke into the house and shot my dad.
It absolutely crossed everybody's mind that this was kind of a copycat murder.
I've told her, hey, your husband's been killed. Your marriage is about to be put under a spotlight.
We discovered that Bob was having an affair.
She had found out that he was having an affair with another man, and that she was very angry about that.
They'd had an argument about that.
Diane was asking, are you telling me my husband's gay?
This is one of those bizarre cases where all the evidence seems to be pointing in one direction, then suddenly the rug is pulled out from under you, stunning everyone.
I was very shocked.
We cut open the pocket, swabbed the edges, hoping to get possible DNA. And the next day, State gave me the name.
I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother.
Friends and family are mourning the loss of Bob Eidman, gunned down in his office in a small strip mall in St. Charles, Missouri.
A man that loved life, always wanted to have fun, always wanted to enjoy himself. He had a great personality, very funny, you know, very intelligent.
You know, he seemed like a nice guy, but after you got to know him a bit, that's when the Bobby came out. I mean, he was extremely comical. He'd make me laugh so hard. I mean, it would hurt.
He liked to have fun. He loved muscle cars. And as far as in the office, you heard him. He was a loud guy. He was one of those guys that when he got on the phone, you kind of put your earplugs in because he was pretty loud. Larger than life, he was.
I could depend on him when I was not in a great place. He would talk and he made sense.
Now Bob Eidman was dead, and nothing made sense. It was a little before 11 a.m. on June 8th when a mail carrier discovered Bob's lifeless body on the floor of his office.
Stop, please, stop. There's a man, I'm delivering the mail right now. He's lying on the floor with blood all over him.
Bob Eidman was shot 3 times.
There was no forced entry or anything. He was a business that was open for business, but it could have absolutely been a robbery.
Robert Eidman's specialty in the insurance company was dealing with high-risk drivers, individuals that could not get insurance through traditional places.
So he would accept cash against a lot of people who didn't take cash and advised them not to take cash.
This is a huge murder case in a very small town. And with more questions than answers, St. Charles PD needs help, and boy, do they get it. Enter the elite major case squad.
20 to 30 detectives will respond, and the only thing they will work on for the next 5 days is that situation they've been called out on.
The investigation into Bob Eidman's murder is all hands on deck.
One of the things that we were not able to recover or locate was Robert Eidman's wallet.
Bob's wife Diane said he always carried his wallet in his back pocket. Police are desperate for leads, so they're going to try something unconventional. They cut the back pockets out of Eidman's pants to send for something they call touch DNA testing.
We just thought maybe a sample of skin cells could be found inside Bob's pocket.
It's a newer technology and it's a long shot. Police, meanwhile, canvassed the neighborhood where the crime occurred. They're knocking on doors, they're looking for every clue they can find.
During the area canvass, there's a Mexican grocery store. It's just a couple of doors down. I think it was on the end of this particular strip mall, and they were able to locate some surveillance video.
A white car passing by twice, but the video is grainy.
In that video footage, we saw a Ford Focus. We were not able to get a license plate due to the angle of the camera, and we were not able to see who was in the vehicle.
With lead after lead coming up empty and the clock ticking on that major case squad, Diane Eidman. She remains a subject of, well, we'll call it curiosity. She was, after all, the person closest to Bob.
It is quite routine for police to look at the spouse of someone who's been murdered.
Tough questions need to be asked about the state of the Eidman's marriage.
I took that a step further. Has there been any time that you two argued? Has there been any time that you were unfaithful to him or he was unfaithful to you?
Diane insisted the marriage was fine. But when investigators seize Bob's computers to be analyzed, they make a shocking discovery. Bob's been visiting gay websites online. He's looking for massages and sexual relations.
Bob Eidman had been leading a secret life, and a search of phone records reveals so much more.
We found several calls that were coming in and coming out pretty much the same time each day. We discovered that Bob was having an affair.
A secret relationship with a man who lived more than 3 hours away. Police take a drive to interview him.
He was very forthcoming in the fact that the relationship between him and Bob was an intimate relationship, but very much affectionate and loving. They'd hoped to be together at some point.
It wasn't like a
quick fling, kind of out the door kind of thing.
I think that's what it was going to be. But we just became good friends and just kept talking from then on.
He says he never visited Bob in St. Charles, but said the two spoke every day and that he loved Bob. The two would stay in motels closer to his hometown when they got together. During the interview with investigators, he rolled up his right sleeve to reveal a tattoo that he said was for Bob.
While doing the search of his home, we located a box the size of a shoebox, and it had cards from Bob. It had receipts from when they'd go to dinner or go to a hotel. He was saving it.
With such tender and strong feelings for Bob, a handful of scenarios leaped to the mind of law enforcement. Could it have been a jilted lover who murdered Bob Eidman?
Feelings can run wild with someone. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. It gives people motive.
In theory, a jilted lover made potential sense to investigators, but the man had an alibi. On the date of the murder, he was at work, hours away from St. Charles.
He was on video, and there were numerous people who said, yes, he was here this day. This is the time he clocked in.
After passing a polygraph, Bob's secret lover is cleared. But it's something he tells investigators about Diane that raises red flags.
He called me. He goes, I got some bad news. I said, what? He said, she read one of my emails. He said that Friday night, he said it was a pretty bad night.
Investigators are now zeroing in on Diane. How angry was she when she discovered Bob's secret life? Angry enough to commit murder?
You never met her before?
No. I've seen her picture.
Would she be angry enough to go in and do that?
I hope not.
Days after Bob Eidman is murdered in his office, police discover the long-married insurance agent had a secret male lover, a man whom he met up with for motel room trysts and who he spoke to every day, a man who was devoted to Bob.
Did you guys love each other, or was it just a very close personal relationship?
I loved it, but I never said it to him.
The secret lover is alibied out for Bob's killing, but in a frank session with police, he says Bob told him that Diane had discovered their relationship, and he says that Bob had told him Diane's reaction had led to a full-blown argument between the two.
He said that, she said, who's, and, so this is, I think he said this is just, a fantasy deal or what have you. It's what Bob said. She asked him if we were sleeping together, and he said no. He said it was pretty rough that night, that Friday night.
It was up to Detective Stephanie Kaiser, the Diane Whisperer, to broach the delicate subject with Bob's widow while interviewing her at the Eidman's home. Kaiser said Diane told her that she'd learned of her husband's relationship with the man after discovering an email between the two, that Bob denied having an affair, but it was the tone of that email which had deeply hurt her feelings.
She describes it as he's telling him intimate things that he hasn't told me. She's telling me I felt hurt because he wasn't speaking to me that way. So they're married.
What do you think she meant when she said that? What kinds of things were they saying to each other?
I didn't ask the specifics, but I'm just talking to her about it. Did this happen? Could this be a motive?
In Detective Kaiser's account, Diane seemed to be struggling a little bit with the nature of her husband's relationship to the man, or what they did during their time together.
When I'm interviewing Diane, one of the things I asked a lot of different things, to the point where Diane was asking me questions like, are you telling me my husband's gay? I asked her, what did Bob tell you? What are your impressions? Her response back was, he told me no. He was going there to meet with him. They worked together, and he needed the stress relief.
Kaiser said Diane told her that when she learned of the relationship after discovering that email, she and Bob discussed it, but they never argued.
I'm telling Diane, Detective Stepp and Detective Grove are talking to him now. He's saying you guys had a loud, angry argument. She said, I don't know that it was loud and angry. Well, that's what he's saying. You know, Diane, what say you? She said, I told him it was over. I told him he was going to end that friendship. But she said, I don't know if I was yelling and screaming. I go, that's what he's saying. I'm just asking. So.
But she laid her foot down. She gave him an
Yes.
ultimatum. You are not to see this guy anymore.
Yes.
As far as you know, did Bob adhere to that ultimatum?
No, he did not.
Diane Eidman finds herself sitting in a polygraph room at the St. Charles Police Department.
So Diane was pretty direct with me. I think she'd had a lot of questions asked of her and then just kind of tells me boldly, I did not do this. I didn't. Diane is just direct.
Diane Eidman voluntarily submitted to a polygraph, and the results came back being inconclusive.
She doesn't pass, but it's inconclusive. So it's just still kind of puts her in that iffy category, if you will.
Adding to investigators' frustration, a day after Diane takes that polygraph test, the clock expires. The major case squad is out of there. 37 officers, 15 different departments had spent more than 2,500 man-hours investigating, with no arrests. A frustrating end to a furious search for answers.
When it goes back to our police department at the time, it is frustrating knowing that you didn't solve this case and it just goes on to an active case file to be looked at as further investigative leads come in.
At that point, I'm assigned the investigation.
The task of solving the murder of Bob Eidman now falls to a junior detective in the department, Don Stepp.
When my sergeant came up and asked if I would like to be assigned this investigation, I was overwhelmed. It's one of those things, am I ready to do this? You don't want to say no, it's an opportunity. I wanted to see this investigation to the end.
Don had contacted me and said, I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to take this entire investigation. I'm going to do everything over again.
What did that feel like to hear?
Well, it was refreshing to, I just felt like there wasn't a lot there.
In 2007, I had only been a detective for 4 years. I was the young guy in the squad.
I had got promoted and I was a police chief at the time, and I didn't want him to feel like there was pressure on him. But he met with me a couple times, and the one time that really struck home is he said, hey, you're like family, and I am going to solve this.
What motivates me to keep going on this investigation is there's someone or someones who had killed Bob Eidman. Bob Eidman needs someone to stand in his corner.
Detective Stepp continues to immerse himself in the details of the case. It had been over a year since Bob Eidman was murdered, when Stepp is at the airport in St. Louis and he spots Diane.
I was off duty, and then I was picking up a family member at the airport, and Diane was walking my direction.
Despite the time that had passed, Diane had never fallen off of Stepp's radar. Diane Eidman knows that you're keeping a close eye on her, doesn't she?
Yes, sir, she does.
How would you characterize the look on her face when she saw you?
Shock. I believe at that point she thought she was going to be arrested.
But the surprise of a chance encounter pales in comparison to the shock investigators get when they receive a call from the crime lab. Remember that pocket police cut out of Bob Eidman's pants to send for DNA analysis?
It blew my mind when the results came back. It was the golden ticket. This is what we were looking for.
It is 2009. And Diane Eidman is spotted at the airport in St. Louis by Detective Don Stepp.
How would you characterize the look on her face when she saw you?
Shock.
Stepp documents the incident, later learns that Diane took a trip to Las Vegas.
But nothing comes of it.
And if you don't have a suspect right away, then there's things that take time. So things slowed down, but things did not stop.
Face it, there are few, if any, solid leads to pursue, including the identity of that mystery driver whose car was seen on the day of the murder.
They had this famous lead about this car that went around the block, and they had it on video, but there were 22 detectives for 5 days, and they didn't find it.
And there's another lingering piece of evidence still out there. That touch DNA taken from Eidman's back pocket. It was sent to the St. Louis Major Crimes Lab.
Anytime you submitted any kind of DNA information, DNA samples, it was going to be a year or more before you got an answer to it.
Nearly 2 agonizing years after Bob's murder, it's as if this case is frozen in time.
I felt that they were never going to solve the case. I mean, we'd pray every day. Just, we need peace. We need answers. We need to find out what happened.
It seemed like there were no answers.
No.
Then in March of 2009, that touch DNA from Bob's pocket is forwarded to Brian Crine. He's a forensic scientist with the St. Charles County Police Department.
We were contacted by investigators and asked if we could do the DNA on the case.
With almost every angle of the case having been explored and explored again, it all comes down to what Crye could uncover with the DNA analysis.
If we were going to swab the back pocket of a pair of pants, we would cut open the pocket, swab the edges, hoping to get possible DNA. Once I get a swab, I process it and cut the tip off and put it in an extraction tube, and then we load it onto a genetic analyzer that ultimately produces a DNA profile.
But given the cold case backlog, it takes several more months for the DNA to be processed. And when the results come back, investigators get a major break that heats up this cold case.
I developed an unknown male profile. It was a mixture of 2 people. One of those persons was the victim, Robert Eidman, and the other one was an unknown male.
I knew once we obtained the DNA profile, the identity of the individual in Bob Eidman's pocket, I knew that was the golden ticket. I knew that was when we were going to be able to close this case.
That unknown DNA could lead investigators to Bob's killer, so Crye enters the profile into CODIS. That's a law enforcement database. Hours later, there's a hit.
It hit that same day, and the next day, state gave me the name.
The DNA doesn't match Bob's wife or his secret lover or anyone else the police had been looking into. Instead, it comes back to someone who was never on the investigators' radar.
What did you learn that person's name was?
Paul White.
When the name's first discovered, Detective Stepp is otherwise engaged.
I was on a traffic detail directing traffic.
You just want to run up and down the street and tell people we've got our guy?
I was very shocked. My mind was not on directing traffic at that time.
What did you do then?
I started researching Paul White.
Turns out Paul White was no stranger to law enforcement, having served 15 years in prison for robbery.
When they got the DNA match, Don had contacted me and said, I'm going to solve this. And I truly believed him. I got to give him a lot of credit. You know, he did a lot of old-fashioned work.
This new lead poses even more questions for investigators. Could Diane have hired Paul White to kill Bob, or had White acted alone? When the DNA came in, that didn't seem to exclude her either. The idea being maybe she had hired somebody.
Yes, I mean, it was worked all the way through.
You now have Paul White's DNA on Robert Eidman's pocket at the time of his murder, right?
Yes, sir.
So I assume you want to talk to Paul White.
Yes, sir, I do.
And Paul White was not hard to find.
Paul White was incarcerated at the time when the DNA came back.
How you doing?
And so in September 2010, Detective Stepp pays a visit to Paul White at a maximum security prison in Fulton, Missouri, where he's serving time for forgery.
Do you have any idea why we're here? I wanted him to know right off the bat that we knew he was there. Does this guy look familiar? Never seen him before. I wanted the truth. I wanted to get a confession from Paul. I've got your DNA in his back pocket.
And will that touch DNA evidence be enough to get that confession?
White leaned back in his chair. He laughed.
It's impossible.
It's not.
It's impossible. It's no way in the world. It's impossible.
What are you thinking when he does that?
I'm thinking this is going to be a long interview.
I'm getting taped and stuff, and what the, man.
More than 2 years after Bob Eidman was robbed and murdered in his own insurance office, test results on trace DNA taken from his back pocket are in, and there's a match.
That individual was in the Department of Corrections in Missouri.
What did you learn that person's name was?
Paul White.
As investigators dig deeper into Paul White's background, they uncover a possible connection to Bob. It's been hiding in plain sight.
There was numerous files on Bob's desk, and there was a file, containing Paul White's name.
Among those files is an application for auto insurance. 2 names are listed, Sherry White and her husband, Paul White. Paul White's wife's file was on Bob's desk?
Yes, sir.
What was it doing?
I think when Mr. Eidman had seen the car pull up and saw Paul White exit the vehicle, he was grabbing Sherry's file to be ready so when he came in.
Investigators quickly clear Sherry White as a suspect in Bob Eidman's murder. With the trail of evidence now leading directly to Paul White, Detective Stepp decides it's time to meet face to face.
This is where the magic happens.
Doesn't look all that magical, does it?
No, it doesn't.
What happens to people when they come into a room like this?
We get to the bottom of facts. This is where people have an opportunity to tell us about what they've done and tell us their story.
Since Paul White is already serving a prison sentence for an unrelated forgery charge, he's literally a captive audience. Let's go back and talk about some of your strategy as you were going to talk to Paul White.
Paul, I believe, was in a little bit of shock after all these years. 2 detectives showing up from St. Charles City. He did not expect that to happen that day. Do you have any idea why we're here? Okay.
Are you thinking the long game at this point, or do you think he's going to start telling you stuff that he knows at that first interview?
I'm thinking to myself, the DNA itself is probably enough to get an arrest warrant, but I didn't want just an arrest warrant. I wanted the truth. Before I ask any questions, you must understand your rights. You don't have to make a statement or answer questions. You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that? Could you put your initials there, Paul, for me? I think initially Paul White's attitude was very kicked back, relaxed. First of all, do you know a guy named Robert Eidman? Never heard of that guy? I even put a picture down in front of him and asked him, do you know this individual? Does this guy look familiar? Never seen him before. Eventually he came back around and said, yeah, I thought that was his wife's insurance man. That picture I showed you, that's Robert Eidman. Okay, you say it kind of looks familiar?
Yeah, that's the guy we got the insurance from.
And I explained that we were working a homicide investigation, and I explained that his DNA was located in his back pocket. Do you think there's any chance that your DNA is going to pop up inside that crime scene?
From a robbery.
From a robbery? None? You come to prison, they take your DNA. Your DNA pops up. You know where it pops up? Swabbing the back pocket of my victim. Your DNA shows up in this guy's back pocket.
That ain't nowhere in the world.
Why don't you think that?
You said that he got robbed. I never robbed the guy. I've been in there one time and to get insurance. So that's
exactly.
Ain't nowhere in the world.
You're telling me you've been in there one time.
Yeah.
And your DNA shows up in this guy's back pocket a month later?
That don't even make sense.
Exactly. With your story, it doesn't make sense.
Again and again during that first interrogation, you tell him, I've got your DNA. I mean, you must have told him, what, 10 or 15 times in the course of that conversation, right?
At least 10 or 15 times. He kept saying, there is no way, repeatedly. He did not believe it.
It's impossible. It's no way in the world. It's impossible.
Paul, it's not possible.
Okay.
Well, I'm telling you.
I know it's impossible. It's no way in the world.
Then how to get there?
I don't even feel like it was there. It's impossible for it to be there.
After White's adamant and repeated denials about that DNA evidence against him, investigators uncover another critical piece of evidence.
I ran every kind of data history check on him. The big point with Paul White was I found out that a neighboring law enforcement agency had issued a ticket to Paul White after our homicide in a white Ford Focus.
That's right, a white Ford Focus. And remember, that's the very same vehicle make caught on a surveillance camera the day Bob Eidman was murdered.
Paul White was a passenger in that vehicle, and the driver was identified via tickets as Cleo Hines.
Why was the car stopped in the first place?
Registration on the vehicle.
The registration on the vehicle was out of date?
That's correct.
Who was the driver of the car?
The driver of the vehicle was Cleo Hines.
What was significant about that?
We later learned that Cleo Hines was living with Paul White, and his girlfriend was best friends with Paul White's wife.
So they had a long-standing relationship?
Yes, sir.
What was the indication that you had that Cleo Hines might have been involved in the murder of Robert Eidman?
It was Cleo Hines' vehicle.
You were sure of that?
I was sure of that. I had a couple other officers contact Cleo Hines, and they arrested Cleo Hines and brought him to the St. Charles City Police Department.
Does Cleo Hines know a secret that could solve Bob Eidman's murder?
You know a man died, right? You know that? Somebody pulled that trigger.
After several years of lead after lead turning cold, the investigation into Bob Eidman's murder is now heating up as lead detective Don Stepp zeroes in on a new suspect, a man named Cleo Hines.
I was going to take the same approach with Cleo Hines as I did with Paul White. Are you the hardened criminal, or are you a guy that made a mistake?
Let's talk about the robbery. Dude, I know all about it.
I told him we had a positive idea of his vehicle. We had a positive idea of a Focus, a white four-door Focus.
You know your vehicle's on video? Do you know that? You know that Mexican grocery store? There's a video camera inside. So I seen you pull in. Now, you didn't just pull around once, did you? No, like twice. You pulled around twice, and that's on camera. Yeah. Then you pulled up.
He knew he owned a white four-door Focus. He knew he was involved in this. There was no way that he could fight that.
Unlike Paul White, Hines immediately starts talking, saying White approached him the day of the murder.
He got a gun in his hand. Okay. He wakes me up out of my sleep, into my head.
He told you he was going to do a robbery?
I basically already knew that because of the gun.
Okay.
And how he was acting. And he didn't have no money.
It took a very short time, and Cleo just started talking and talking and talking.
What kind of handgun do you think it was?
It looked kind of like a 9mm Glock.
A 9mm Glock, the same type of handgun investigators determined was used to murder Bob Eidman. But the question is, who pulled the trigger?
Somebody pulled that trigger. Okay.
It wasn't me, it was him.
Okay.
And Cleo wanted to give his side of the story to defend himself against whatever Paul might say he did.
I told him 2 minutes to drop him. I'm outside, though. He goes and about 5 minutes later, he comes back out.
Do you have gloves on?
Paul? Yeah. He has a white gloves. White gloves. They were like cotton, like gloves.
Paul White had been wearing gloves, so Paul White absolutely wasn't going to say anything because he believed his DNA couldn't have been located because he was wearing gloves.
I don't even feel like it was there. It's impossible for it to be there.
So if a perpetrator was wearing a cotton glove when they go into the pocket and digging around, they could leave that DNA that's already on the exterior inside the pocket. Also, if the individual is sweating, it could actually soak through the glove and leave DNA behind that way.
What do you do with those gloves after the shooting? In the barbecue pit? Yeah.
Armed with Cleo Hines' confession, Stepp hits the road to Fulton Prison once more for another crack at Paul White.
And I'm gonna tell you right up now, I got a full confession from Cleo Hines. Okay, he told me everything.
But even after Detective Stepp reveals Cleo Hines has accused Paul White of being the gunman, Paul White doesn't blink.
If you got Cleo saying that I did this and that, he's evidently lying to you. And I don't know why he would even say that I would put a gun to his head and force him to do something.
It's hard to do an interview to get a confession from somebody for a murder. It's really hard to get a confession from somebody for a murder inside prison.
White is arrested the next day, and he's charged with robbery and murder, and could be facing life in prison. Now, with the pressure turned up so high, will he finally change his story?
I've asked you 3 times. Drove 87 miles one way to ask you these questions.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically. Hypothetically.
If I say I was there, you know what I mean, and I saw everything that happened, you know what I mean, and it's like, that just makes me as guilty. You know, I still get a murder charge, but I didn't kill him. I didn't pull the trigger.
Finally, the dam breaks. Paul White starts talking.
I said, I think he got some cash in there, you know what I mean? So I said, well, you can go in and rob him, but I said, he probably know who I am, so we're gonna have to get some match. We already had those gloves, those cotton gloves that you were talking about, and then we went up to Walmart, and they had those little type ski masks.
Paul White describes a chilling scene of a panicked Bob Eidman trying to comply with his assailant's demands for money with that notoriously sticky desk drawer, you know, where Bob kept his money, instead of in a safe.
And then he started shaking it, like, to his drawer and couldn't get the drawer open. And I was like, man, just give me your wallet. So I reached in his pocket and grabbed the wallet. And Cleo was like, man, no, there's more money there.
There was a lot of finger pointing at each other, trying to point the blame to someone else.
Cleo Hines told police he never even got out of the car at Bob Eidman's office. But Paul White wants police to believe that it was always Hines who had fired the bullets that killed Bob Eidman.
He shot him once. He was like, man, where the rest of the money? Where the rest of the money? And he was like, man, there is no other money. There is no other money. And he shot him again. I'm like, man, what the you doing? I said, man, is he dead? He was like, I don't know. Shot him again. So I'm like, man, we gotta get rid of this gun. You know what I'm saying? I took it and threw it off the bridge.
Paul White offers to help find the murder weapon, riding along in handcuffs in the back seat of a squad car.
We took Paul White out of the St. Charles County Jail.
Going to find a weapon.
And had him point out the area where he got rid of the gun.
I would say, like, right in here.
We searched an extensive area for the gun, was never able to locate it.
Now we have 2 suspects and 2 confessions. And with both men pointing the finger at each other, prosecutors are gearing up to put both of them on trial.
I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother, and that was pretty hard to be calm.
Will Bob Eidman's family finally learn who murdered him? At the climax of a more than 3-year investigation that at one point involved 37 officers, cops finally learned the details of what was stolen the day of Bob Eidman's murder.
How much money was in the wallet?
Wasn't nothing but like $300.
So, how much you
like
get?
$150 apiece.
$150 apiece.
Paul White and Cleo both advised they went to the casino after the homicide and lost the $300 almost immediately.
We went to the casino because that's what he paid a lot. He lost the money. Yeah, basically did for nothing. Right.
hard to think about a man's life being taken for $300.
He didn't deserve what he got. He was running a business, trying to make a living, and somebody felt that what he had, they needed too. And so they took it from him. They could have taken his money and left. They didn't have to kill him.
As far as any connection between the two men accused of killing Bob Eidman and Bob's widow, Diane, Paul White revealed to investigators that he didn't even know who she was.
Do you know a woman named Diane?
No.
You don't know a woman named Diane Eidman?
No.
With Paul White and Cleo Hines now both charged with Bob Eidman's murder, it now falls to Detective Stepp to break the news to Diane Eidman, who had long been in his crosshairs.
I met Diane at her place of employment, and I said, Diane, this is over. We have the individuals, and we have the charges on them for killing your husband.
Was she angry at you?
I don't believe she was angry at me. There was a lot of stress that just came off Diane. You could almost see it leaving her body as she was shaking and crying. She was very happy that this was over.
Here, some 5 years after Bob Eidman's murder, Paul White and Cleo Hines are set to stand trial in this courthouse. 2 trials, 2 defendants, with 2 totally different accounts of the crime.
First up at trial, Paul White, who pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree robbery.
Really didn't know what to think when I came into trial because I was sitting in the same room with the person that shot and killed my brother. And that was pretty hard.
The trial for Paul White lasted 3 days, which is actually very short for a murder trial in this county.
The trial was swift, and so were the deliberations. The jury needed just 2.5 hours before delivering a verdict. Paul White, guilty of murder and robbery in the first degree.
As for Cleo Hines, he decided not to put his fate in the hands of a jury. Before his trial, he entered what's known as an Alford plea.
An Alford plea is a plea in the state of Missouri where an individual will not say, I did it, but there's enough evidence to say I did it.
With that plea, Hines is convicted of a lesser crime than White, second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He received 2 life terms, but while Hines' sentence offers the possibility of parole, Paul White will never again see the light of day outside a prison.
Paul White was sentenced to life without parole in the Missouri Department of Corrections.
The investigation into Bob Eidman's murder had cast a shadow of suspicion on his widow, Diane. Now she stood in court and gave her own account of all she had lost. Were you there for Diane's victim impact statement?
Yes, we were. She said, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. You took my best friend. You took my husband away from me.
She told the court this in part. I looked over my shoulder for 5 years afraid, never knowing if the people who killed Bob were coming after me, or did the police really believe that I killed my husband?
I do feel like the system worked. The killers were caught. Science prevailed and overwhelmingly provided evidence that got them a conviction. Never again can he come to a Christmas dinner. Never again can we see him for a birthday party. Never again could he and my son talk and have a conversation or a relationship.
He just loved life. I mean, he was always happy and making jokes, making light of things all the time. We talk about him all the time. It's not like he's gone. He's still here with us.
Both Paul White and Cleo Hines have tried appealing their convictions, but both were denied.
White's life sentence carries no possibility of parole. Hines' first opportunity at parole will be in March of 2034. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
In a moment of apparent contrition, Fuentes Flores offered to guide detectives to the location where he had concealed Nancy's remains. The journey led investigators deep into the arid, rugged terrain of the Carrizo Plain, a remote desert area on the eastern edge of the county. After searching several locations, Fuentes Flores began to weep and pointed toward a small, unnatural arrangement of rocks amidst the dry brush. There, detectives discovered Nancy's remains. Following his confession and the recovery of the victim, Fuentes Flores was charged with first-degree murder under the special circumstance of rape. Despite his detailed confession and admissions made to his wife during recorded jail telephone conversations, he initially entered a plea of not guilty. His defense team attempted to suppress the interrogation recordings, arguing that as a native Spanish speaker, he should have been provided an interpreter despite his demonstrated fluency in English throughout the interview. The court denied the motion, finding that his constitutional rights had been fully respected. In January of 2022, rather than proceeding with a lengthy and painful trial, Fuentes Flores agreed to a slow plea, a legal procedure where the judge reviews the extensive evidence and renders a verdict. The court found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the legal resolution brought an end to the judicial process, the pain of Nancy's absence remains a permanent reality for her family and community. Amanda continues to run the salon, carrying on her mother's legacy of warmth and connection. She and her daughter ride Nancy's beloved horse, Montana, keeping her memory alive in the quiet beauty of the Paso Robles countryside. As we transition our analytical focus from the Golden Hills of California to the majestic, snow-capped mountains of Summit County, Utah, we encounter another deeply troubling study in criminal psychology. In the case of Carlo Fuentes Flores, we observed a perpetrator whose violent impulses erupted from a hidden personal life, ultimately exposed by the objective reality of digital tracking. In our next case, we examine a different and perhaps more complex psychological profile, an individual who allegedly sought to construct an elaborate public narrative of grief and tragedy to conceal a calculated and financially motivated crime. The mountain community of Summit County, Utah, is known for its affluent residences, world-class ski resorts, and serene natural environment. It is a place where family values, community solidarity, and professional success are highly esteemed. Within this setting, Eric and Corey Richens appeared to embody the ideal of the American dream. Eric Richens was a 39-year-old stonemason who had built a highly successful business, C&E Masonry, raised in a devout family belonging to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Eric was a man of deep faith, strong work ethic, and an intense passion for the outdoors. He was a dedicated father to his 3 young sons, coaching their soccer teams, taking them camping, and sharing his love for the rugged Utah wilderness. Corey Richens was a bright, ambitious woman who had risen from humble beginnings. To establish her own real estate and house-flipping business, K. Richens Realty. She was known as a devoted mother, actively involved in her children's schools, sports, and community events. Together, the couple enjoyed a highly affluent lifestyle, purchasing a beautiful home and taking frequent vacations. However, beneath this pristine exterior, serious financial and marital tensions were developing. Corey's business ambitions had grown significantly, leading her to undertake increasingly risky and expensive renovation projects. Among her most ambitious endeavors was the purchase of a partially completed, multi-million-dollar mansion in Midway, Utah, which she envisioned transforming into a luxury event venue. To fund these ventures, Corey began securing large, high-interest loans, commonly referred to as hard money loans, which placed an immense financial strain on her operations. In 2020, Eric made a troubling discovery. Corey had secretly secured a $250,000 line of credit against their family home, which Eric owned solely. This revelation shattered Eric's trust in his wife's financial integrity. In response, Eric consulted a divorce attorney and took immediate steps to protect his assets and his children's future. He secretly established a family trust, naming his sister, Katie, as the trustee and executor, and designating his 3 sons as the sole beneficiaries of his estate, effectively excluding Corey. Despite these measures, the couple remained together, participating in marriage, counseling, and attempting to project an image of domestic harmony. Yet the underlying resentment and financial desperation continued to simmer. In the early morning hours of March 4th, 2022, Corey placed a frantic call to 911. She reported that she had spent the evening celebrating a major business acquisition with her husband, during which she had prepared a mixed drink for him. She claimed she later went to sleep in one of her son's bedrooms to comfort him during a night terror. When she returned to the master bedroom at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, she found Eric cold to the touch and unresponsive. Emergency responders arrived at the scene to find Corey performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation on her husband. Despite their efforts, Eric was pronounced deceased at the scene. Initial observations by paramedics, who noted a small amount of blood near Eric's mouth, led to a preliminary hypothesis that he may have suffered a sudden medical event, such as a brain aneurysm. However, the subsequent autopsy and toxicology analysis revealed a far more sinister reality. The medical examiner determined that Eric's death was caused by a lethal oral ingestion of illicit fentanyl. The concentration of the drug in his system was determined to be over 5 times the lethal dosage. Crucially, the substance was identified as illicitly manufactured street fentanyl rather than pharmaceutical-grade medication. The revelation of a fatal overdose in a healthy, athletic young man who was known to have no history of illicit drug use immediately transformed the medical. Inquiry into a homicide investigation. The Summit County Sheriff's Office, working alongside private investigators hired by Eric's suspicious family, began a deep examination of Corey's activities and financial records. The tension between the two families erupted almost immediately after Eric's passing. Within days of his death, Corey attempted to access a safe in the family home containing Eric's will. When Eric's sister, Amy, intervened, pointing out that Eric had altered his estate plan to exclude his wife, a physical altercation ensued, resulting in Corey's arrest and subsequent conviction for simple assault. As the financial investigation progressed, detectives uncovered the true extent of Corey's financial distress. She was facing millions of dollars in debt, with several of her properties, including the Midway Mansion, facing foreclosure. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey had taken out multiple life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge, totaling nearly $2 million in coverage. The behavioral evidence grew even more complex when, in the year following Eric's death, Corey authored and self-published a children's grief book titled, Are You With Me? The book, written from the perspective of a child wondering if their deceased father is still present in their life, was dedicated to Eric. Corey embarked on a media campaign to promote the book, appearing on local television programs to discuss her family's journey through grief and offering advice to other bereaved parents. To the public, she presented herself as a tragic, courageous widow. To investigators, this public display was increasingly viewed as a calculated effort to deflect suspicion and control the narrative. The breakthrough in the criminal investigation came through the analysis of Corey's communication records. Investigators identified frequent text messages and calls between Corey and a woman named Carmen Lauber, who had previously worked for Corey's cleaning service and possessed a known history of drug offenses. Faced with potential drug distribution and weapon charges, Lauber agreed to cooperate with law enforcement. She revealed that Corey had approached her on two separate occasions prior to Eric's death, requesting that she procure strong pain medication, specifically identifying fentanyl. Lauber admitted to purchasing the illicit pills from a local dealer and delivering them to Corey. The timing of these transactions was highly significant. The first delivery occurred in early February of 2022. On Valentine's Day of that year, Corey purchased a sandwich for Eric from a local deli. After taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric became violently ill, suffering a severe reaction that required him to use his son's epinephrine auto-injector and take antihistamines before falling into a deep sleep. He subsequently texted a friend stating that he believed his wife had attempted to poison him. The second delivery of fentanyl from Lauber to Corey occurred on February 26th, just days before Eric's fatal overdose. In addition to the financial motive, investigators uncovered evidence of a romantic incentive. Cell phone records revealed that Corey had been engaged in a long-term secretive affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. The two exchanged daily, highly affectionate messages, with Corey expressing a deep desire to leave her marriage and build a future with Grossman, suggesting that life would be perfect if her husband were to simply go away. In May of 2023, Corey Richins was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances, with intent to distribute. While held in the Summit County Jail pending trial, Corey's actions continued to draw the attention of authorities during a routine search of her cell. Corrections officers discovered a handwritten, 4-page letter addressed to her mother. The letter, which the prosecution characterized as an attempt at witness tampering, instructed her mother to direct her brother, Ronnie, to deliver false testimony claiming that Eric had routinely obtained pain medication and fentanyl during trips to Mexico. In March of 2024, the prosecution amended the charges to include attempted murder, specifically relating to the Valentine's Day sandwich incident. Despite the mounting evidence, Corey maintained her innocence, releasing an audio statement from jail claiming she had always sought to protect her husband and would never harm him. The highly anticipated trial commenced in a small courthouse near Park City, Utah. The prosecution presented a comprehensive case detailing Corey's immense debt, her secret insurance policies, her affair, and the testimony of Carmen Lauber and the drug supplier. Perhaps the most poignant moment of the trial occurred when Josh Grossman took the stand. Visible, shaken, and emotional, Grossman testified about their relationship and the corny, affectionate text messages they had exchanged. Crucially, he recounted a conversation they had shared in her vehicle after Eric's death, during which Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq, and how that experience had made him feel. The defense focused their strategy on highlighting the absence of direct physical evidence showing Corey placing the drugs in Eric's drink on the night of his death, in a dramatic and unexpected legal maneuver following the conclusion of the state's 13-day presentation. The defense chose to rest their case without calling a single witness or presenting a defense narrative, banking on their belief that the prosecution had failed to meet the high burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. After a trial lasting several weeks, the 8-member jury retired to deliberate. In under 3 hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict, finding Corey Richins guilty of aggravated murder and all remaining charges. The swift verdict brought a sense of relief and justice to Eric's family and friends who had endured years of emotional turmoil. For the community, the conviction of Corey Richins served as a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences of unbridled ambition, deception, and the chilling capacity of an individual to wear a mask of grief to conceal a terrible deed. As we reflect on these two extraordinary cases, we are reminded of the vital importance of professional, scientific, and dedicated law enforcement work, whether through the innovative application of digital geofencing in the search for Nancy Woodrum, or the relentless financial and forensic analysis that exposed the actions of Corey Richins, justice was ultimately served through the quiet, patient effort to uncover the truth. In the end, the memory of the victims and the love they shared with their families remains the true light that dispels even the deepest darkness. The anatomy of deception. In the quiet corridors of human experience, we often comfort ourselves with the belief that evil announces itself. We expect the monstrous to wear a recognizable mask, to speak in harsh tones, and to dwell in the shadowed margins of society. Yet, as any seasoned criminal psychology analyst will observe, the most chilling threats often were the face of the mundane. They are found in the pleasant smiles of neighbors, the ambitious strides of local entrepreneurs, and the solemn countenances of grieving spouses. Deception is not merely a falsehood spoken to evade consequences. It is an elaborate lifestyle, a constructed reality designed to shield the perpetrator from the gaze of justice, and occasionally from their own conscience. To understand the criminal mind is to embark on a journey through the labyrinth of human rationalization, the transition from processing personal or financial distress to executing a cold, calculated act of malice requires a psychological scaffolding. The individual must convince themselves that their desires outweigh the very existence of another. In this exploration, we examine too deeply troubling cases that unfolded in seemingly idyllic landscapes, the mountain towns of Utah and the sun-drenched vineyards of California. Both narratives reveal the intricate dance between outward presentation and inward rot, and both serve as testaments to the quiet, relentless brilliance of modern investigative forces. Through the lens of forensic science, digital footprints, and psychological profiling, we will deconstruct how these modern mysteries were unraveled. In doing so, we honor the memory of the victims, Eric Richins, a devoted father and craftsman, and Nancy Woodrum, a woman of deep faith and generous spirit. Their lives were cut short by individuals who believed their own cleverness could outmatch the natural order of truth. But as these cases demonstrate, the truth has a patient, persistent way of rising to the surface. The Gilded Lamentation, the case of Corey Richins. The public first encountered Corey Richins not as a suspect, but as an apostle of grief. On local television screens, she appeared as a picture of tragic resilience, a young mother of 3 young boys, ages 10, 9, and 6, navigating the unbearable void left by the sudden and unexpected passing of her 39-year-old husband, Eric. She sat before interviewers, her voice steady but laced with soft sorrow, promoting a self-published children's book titled, "Are You With Me?" The book, she explained, was born from her family's private struggle. It was presented as a literary nightlight for children navigating the dark, frightening waters of loss. The narrative spoke of a child wondering if his deceased father was still present at soccer games, cheering from an unseen sideline, while the father's spirit replied with reassuring warmth. To the casual observer, Corey was a heroine of domestic tragedy, converting her immense pain into a public service. Yet to the trained analyst, there is often a delicate, almost imperceptible line between genuine memorialization and psychological displacement. Sometimes, the perpetrator of a heinous act will wrap themselves in the mantle of the victim's advocate. It is a highly sophisticated form of cognitive shielding. By writing a book about the tragedy, Corey was not merely comforting her children. She was attempting to write the definitive narrative of Eric's death before anyone else could examine the footnotes. She was constructing a monument to her own innocence, printed on glossy pages and bound in paternal sentimentality. But behind this literary facade lay a dark, chaotic reality of immense debt, fractured family trust, and a double life that would ultimately collapse under the weight of forensic truth. The fateful call and the silent house. The official record of this tragedy begins not with a book, but with a frantic call to emergency services, a little after 3 in the morning on a cold March night. Corey's voice filled the dispatch lines. She reported that her husband, Eric, was cold to the touch and not breathing. The dispatcher, operating with the calm urgency of their profession, instructed her to begin chest compressions, counting out the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. When emergency responders arrived at the family's residence in Kamas, Utah, they found a chaotic scene. Firefighters and paramedics descended upon the master bedroom, where Eric lay on his back on the floor. A cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine was deployed, its rhythmic mechanical thudding filling the tense air, but there was no pulse, no breath, no spark of life remaining. Eric Richins had been dead for some time before the first siren wailed in the distance. On the body-worn cameras of the responding officers, we see Corey standing in the hallway, attempting to explain the inexplicable. Her narrative was a tapestry of domestic routine and sudden medical failure. She explained that they had been celebrating a successful real estate transaction earlier that evening, sharing a drink at 9 o'clock to toast her professional triumph. She mentioned that one of her sons had suffered a night terror, prompting her to go to the child's room to comfort him. When she returned to the master bedroom in the early hours of the morning, she reached out to her husband, only to find him unresponsive. When officers questioned her about Eric's health, she painted a picture of minor ailments. She mentioned he suffered from Lyme disease, a condition he contracted during his outdoor excursions, and suggested he occasionally took a sleeping aid or a tetrahydrocannabinol gummy to rest. But she insisted he was otherwise healthy, an active and athletic man who worked hard on the family's cattle ranch and ran a highly successful stonemasonry business. Yet, even in those first hours, the sharp eyes of the first responders noticed details that did not quite align with a peaceful passing in the night. There was a surprising amount of blood around Eric's mouth, a detail that puzzled the Paramedics, an initial tentative hypothesis of a brain aneurysm was floated by. An emergency medical technician on the scene, a theory that Corey and her mother quickly adopted. To the grieving family, it was a comforting explanation, a sudden, silent biological betrayal that no one could have prevented. But the state has a legal and moral obligation to investigate any sudden, unexpected death of a young, healthy individual. The county coroner's office initiated a forensic autopsy, a standard procedure that would soon tear away the veil of natural tragedy, the fraudulent foundation. To understand the motivation behind Eric Richen's death, one must look past the suburban luxury of the family home and peer into the ledger books of Corey's business ventures. Corey had grown up in a family of modest means, moving frequently as her parents worked construction jobs. She was a young woman of intense ambition, a quality that could be a virtue when tempered by ethics, but a dangerous catalyst when fueled by greed. For years, she had watched the wealthy residents of Park City from distance, cleaning their expansive mansions as part of her aunt's business. She harbored a deep, driving desire to be the one who owned the mansions, not the one who scrubbed their floors. In 2019, she launched her own Real estate firm, specializing in home flipping. On the surface, she appeared highly successful, managing 15 projects simultaneously and posting celebratory videos on social media with satisfied clients. But the reality of high-stakes real estate is unforgiving. Corey had set her sights on her most ambitious project yet, a massive, unfinished mansion in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million. She envisioned transforming this property into a grand event space for weddings, a venture she believed would secure her place among the local elite. To fund this dream, she began operating in the high-risk world of hard money loans, borrowing millions of dollars at exorbitant interest rates. As her debts mounted, Corey began to view her husband's assets not as family security, but as a personal reserve. In 2020, Eric discovered a devastating betrayal. Corey had secretly forged his signature to secure a $150,000 line of credit against their family home, a property that Eric owned solely. This discovery shattered the foundation of their marriage. Eric, a traditional man who valued hard work and financial prudence, consulted a divorce attorney. Though they remained together and entered counseling, the trust was permanently broken. Eric took quiet, deliberate steps to protect his assets and, most importantly, his 3 young sons. He established a private trust, naming his sister as the executor and designating his children as the sole beneficiaries of his estate and the family home. He signed a prenuptial agreement on the very day of their wedding, a document that Corey had signed with great reluctance, which ensured his masonry business would remain his alone unless he passed away while they were married. Thus, a terrible financial calculus began to take shape in the shadows of Corey's mind. If Eric divorced her, she would be left ruined, buried under. Millions of dollars of business debt with no access to his wealth. But if Eric were to die, she would stand to inherit his life insurance policies, his estate, and the freedom to pursue her real estate empire unhindered. The forensic revelation. When the toxicological analysis of Eric's blood was completed, the results sent shockwaves through the community. There was no brain aneurysm, no sudden heart failure, and no complication from Lyme disease. The cause of death was acute drug intoxication. Specifically, the medical examiner found a massive, lethal concentration of fentanyl in Eric's system, a dosage 5 times the amount required to kill an average adult. Crucially, the substance was identified as illicitly manufactured fentanyl, not the medical-grade compound prescribed by doctors. This was a street drug, substance manufactured in clandestine laboratories containing impurities that pointed directly to an illegal source. For Eric's family, the report confirmed their worst fears. Eric was a man who despised drugs, who built his life on physical labor and outdoor sports. He did not abuse opioids. His family immediately directed the attention of law enforcement toward Corey, sharing their long-held suspicions about her financial deceptions and previous bizarre illnesses that Eric had suffered. Armed with the toxicological findings, the Summit County Sheriff's Office initiated a homicide investigation. Investigators secured search warrants for the Richens' home, seizing electronic devices, cell phones, and financial documents. While they found no physical traces of fentanyl within the residence, the digital evidence would tell a far more damning story. The illicit pipeline. A criminal investigation is often a process of reconstructing a suspect's digital life. When detectives analyzed Corey's phone records, they discovered a persistent, high-frequency circle of communication. Aside from her husband and her mother, Corey was in constant contact with a woman named Carmen Lauber, a local resident with a history of drug-related offenses who had worked as a cleaner on some of Corey's real estate properties. Under the direction of lead detective Jeff O'Driscoll, law enforcement began to focus on Carmen, using a tactical opportunity presented by Carmen's probation status. Detectives searched her residence and uncovered evidence of drug possession and an illegal firearm. Facing the prospect of decades in prison, Carmen agreed to cooperate with the state, revealing the grim details of her transactions with Corey. According to Carmen, Corey had approached her in early 2022, asking if she could procure strong pain medication for an investor who had suffered a back injury. Carmen complied, obtaining hydrocodone pills. But shortly thereafter, Corey returned with a more specific, lethal request. She wanted some of that Cold War stuff, which Carmen understood to mean fentanyl. Carmen reached out to her local dealer, a man named Robert Crozier. She purchased a batch of illicit pills and delivered them to Corey at a real estate property. But a few weeks later, Corey contacted her again, complaining that the first batch was not strong enough and demanding a more potent dosage. Carmen secured a second delivery of fentanyl pills shortly before Eric's death. The chronological alignment of these drug acquisitions with critical events in the Richens household was devastating. On the 14th of February, 2022, Valentine's Day, Corey purchased a breakfast sandwich for Eric from a local diner. Within minutes of taking a bite, Eric became violently ill, exhibiting symptoms of an allergic reaction or poisoning. He was forced to use his son's epinephrine auto-injector and take Benadryl before losing consciousness. He survived that day, but he sent a text message to a friend containing a chilling prophetic warning. I think she tried to poison me. The courtroom drama. In May of 2023, the state of Utah formally arrested Corey Richens, charging her with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances with the intent to distribute. The arrest of a successful businesswoman and children's book author captured national attention, transforming the quiet mountain courthouse into a media circus. When the trial finally commenced, the prosecution, led by attorney Brad Bloodworth, presented a meticulous case built on 3 pillars: financial desperation, romantic evasion, and forensic science. The state argued that Corey was drowning in a sea of debt exceeding $4 million and had constructed a plan to murder her husband to secure his assets and escape a marriage she felt trapped in. To support the romantic motive, the prosecution introduced a witness whose presence in the courtroom was a literal bombshell: Josh Grossman, a handyman and war veteran with whom Corey had been conducting a secret, intense affair. Grossman took the stand, his demeanor a mixture of sorrow and profound embarrassment. The state projected their private text messages onto a massive screen, exposing the raw, intimate details of their relationship to the court. While Grossman spoke of genuine affection, the text messages revealed a highly revealing psychological dynamic. Corey had painted a fantasy life for Grossman, promising him a future where they would live together in the guest house of the Midway mansion, operating a lucrative event center and raising children. But the most damning text message was sent less than 48 hours before Eric's death. Corey had messaged Grossman, pleading with him to hang in until Friday, promising that life is going to be different, I promise. Friday was the day Eric Richens died. Furthermore, Grossman testified to a chilling conversation they shared in her car in the weeks following Eric's death. Corey had turned to him, looking at his military background, and asked if he had ever killed anyone during his service in Iraq and how it made him feel. It was a question that hung heavily in the air of the courtroom, a window into her preoccupation with the psychology of termination, the unexpected resolution. The prosecution's case spanned 13 days, featuring expert accountants, medical examiners, digital analysts, and close friends of both the victim and the defendant. When the state rested, the courtroom prepared for a lengthy, complex defense presentation expected to last over a week. But a move that stunned legal observers and the jury alike, Corey's newly appointed defense team, led by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Winnie Lewis, stood up and immediately rested their case without calling a single witness. In the calculus of criminal defense, resting without presenting a case is a high-risk gamble. It is a statement to the jury that the prosecution has failed to meet the high burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense argued that there was no direct forensic evidence, no physical traces of fentanyl on Corey's hands, and no eyewitness to the act of administration. They suggested that Eric's death was a tragic, self-inflicted accidental overdose, pointing to his occasional use of sleep aids. But the jury, composed of 8 citizens, was not swayed by the defense's silence. They had seen the toxicological reports, the financial records, the drug pipeline through Carmen Lauber, and the incriminating internet searches Corey had conducted, which included queries about luxury prisons for the rich and what is a lethal dose of fentanyl. After a deliberation of less than 3 hours, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty of aggravated murder and all remaining charges. The conviction of Corey Richins was a triumph of systematic, modern detective work over a highly calculated domestic plot. It proved that a children's book, a sympathetic television interview, and a wealth of social media posts cannot obscure the cold, hard reality of forensic science. For Eric's family, the verdict brought a quiet, solemn sense of justice, a realization that the bright light of truth had finally pierced the gilded veneer of Corey's deception. The shadow over Paradise Ranch, the case of Nancy Woodrum. While the mountain valleys of Utah were grappling with the trial of Corey, Richins, another equally chilling mystery, had unfolded years earlier along the scenic coast of California. The Central Coast region, particularly the town of Paso Robles, is famous for its rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and world-class vineyards. It is a destination of peace and natural beauty, a place where people go to escape the frantic pace of metropolitan life. In this beautiful landscape lived Nancy Woodrum, a 62-year-old woman who ran a popular hair salon called The Strand. Nancy was a pillar of her community, known for her warmth, her generosity, and her deep, abiding faith as a Jehovah's Witness. She was an avid equestrian, finding peace and spiritual connection while riding her horse, Montana, through the scenic trails of her property on El Faro Road. In 2006, Nancy and her late husband, Robert, had purchased a rural property, which they painstakingly remodeled into a stunning estate they named Paradise Ranch. Following Robert's passing, Nancy turned the main house into a highly popular vacation rental, while she lived in a small, cozy cottage on the same land. Her goal was simple. She wished to sell the ranch, simplify her life, and devote her remaining years to full-time ministry, sharing her hope of a peaceful future with others. But in May of 2018, Paradise Ranch would become the stage for a terrifying crime, transforming a tranquil wedding weekend into a high-stakes. Investigation. The revelation of absence. The alarm was first raised on a Saturday morning when Nancy failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study, an absence that was deeply out of character for a woman. Of her devotion, her daughter, Amanda, contacted a neighbor to check on her. Mother's cottage. The neighbor's report was chilling. The front door of the cottage was wide open. The television was blaring, but Nancy was nowhere to be found. When Amanda arrived at the property, her worst fears were realized. The cottage was intact. Nancy's purse, car keys, cellular phone, and tablet were still, resting on a bench, and her 2 vehicles were parked outside. But there were horrific signs of violence. 2 large, dark blood stains marred the bedroom. Carpet. There was blood spatter on the walls, the headboard, and a nearby cabinet. The sheets and bedding from her bed were entirely missing. The situation was exceptionally complicated. That very weekend, more than 20 wedding guests had checked into the main house at Paradise Ranch for a vineyard wedding. The property was filled with people celebrating a joyous occasion, completely unaware that a violent struggle had taken place only yards away from where they slept. When the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office received the emergency call, Senior Deputy Clinton Cole was dispatched to the scene. Cole, a veteran investigator, recognized immediately that this was not a simple missing persons case. It was a crime scene of the most serious nature. Nancy Woodrum had been assaulted in her bedroom and taken against her will. The scattered clues. As forensic teams processed the cottage, they faced a daunting list of potential suspects. The wedding guests who had access to the property had to be interviewed and ruled out. Some guests, including one who had stayed behind, while others attended the rehearsal dinner, initially exhibited defensive behavior, raising red flags for the investigators. But systematic questioning, supported by digital photographs from the dinner event, eventually cleared them of involvement. The investigation received its first major breakthrough on that same Saturday evening. A California Highway Patrol officer reported finding a bundle of bloody bedding and women's clothing discarded along La Ponza Road, a remote rural route, approximately 7 miles from Paradise Ranch. Amanda confirmed that the gingham pattern sheets and the clothing belonged to her mother. The evidence painted a grim picture. Nancy had been wrapped in her own bedding and transported to a secondary, unknown location. But who had the local knowledge to navigate these remote dirt roads in the dark of night? While examining the master bedroom, a forensic specialist made a critical observation. On a beige pillow left on the bed, there was a partial handprint, pressed in blood. The nature of the print suggested that the pillow had been used as a tool of compression, perhaps to smother Nancy during the assault. Investigators carefully swabbed the blood and the handprint, extracting a sample of unknown male deoxyribonucleic acid. The sample was run through the national database, but it returned no matches. This meant the perpetrator was someone without a criminal record, a ghost in the system who had never been fingerprinted or swabbed by law enforcement. The digital trap. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation began to stall. The sheriff's department faced growing public pressure, with community members fearing that a predator was loose in their peaceful valley. Investigators had systematically cleared local contractors, disgruntled workers, and even Nancy's estranged family members through voluntary deoxyribonucleic acid testing. But the detectives refused to let the case go cold. They decided to deploy a cutting-edge forensic tool that had never been used in their county and was virtually unprecedented in the state of California: a Google geofence search warrant. Geofencing is a highly sophisticated digital technique. It allows investigators to draw a virtual boundary around a specific geographic area and request Google to identify any active mobile devices that entered that boundary during a precise window of time. The timeline for the search warrant was established by a crucial piece of evidence. When investigators analyzed Nancy's phone records, they discovered a failed emergency 911 call attempted at 12:17 on the night. She disappeared. The call had been terminated after 0 seconds, indicating that someone had forcefully seized the phone or shut it off the moment she tried to call for help. Using this precise timestamp, detectives drew a virtual fence around Nancy's cottage. When the data returned from Google, it was incredibly sparse, which was a blessing for investigators. In a rural, isolated area like El Faro Road, there should be no random cell phone activity in the middle of the night. The geofence data revealed a single, unknown mobile device pinging inside Nancy's cottage at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning. Google provided the unique device identification number, which led investigators to the subscriber information. The owner of the device was Carlo Fuentes Flores, the two faces of the perpetrator. The name was immediately familiar to the investigators. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a local painter who had been hired to perform exterior maintenance on the buildings at Paradise Ranch to prepare the property for sale. During the initial phase of the investigation, detectives had interviewed Fuentes Flores. He had been exceptionally polite, cooperative, and mild-mannered. He had spoken warmly of Nancy, describing her as a hard worker who had read scriptures with him and even gifted him homemade tamales. He had a wife, a young daughter whom he adored, and a spotless record with no history of violence or criminal activity in either the United States of America or Mexico. But the geofence data did not lie. His phone had been inside Nancy's home in the dead of night, at the exact hour she was abducted. To understand how a seemingly peaceful family man could be connected to such a horrific crime, detectives conducted a forensic audit of his digital life. What they discovered was a classic psychological duality, a classic Jekyll and Hyde scenario. By day, Fuentes Flores was a neat, professional painter, highly recommended by his employers and beloved by his family. But by night, his digital searches revealed a dark, obsessive fixation. He spent hours consuming specific categories of internet pornography, focusing on older women or cougars. His phone contained numerous self-shot videos of encounters with escorts and call girls, revealing a secret life of compulsion and infidelity that he kept hidden from his wife and community. Detectives now had a motive, a sexually motivated obsession with Nancy, fueled by his proximity to her while working on her property, combined with a belief that his quiet, respectful demeanor would shield him from suspicion. The path to resolution. To secure an arrest, investigators needed a direct link between Fuentes Flores and the crime scene. They launched a covert surveillance operation, tracking him to a local restaurant where he had lunch with his wife. When he departed, undercover officer quickly retrieved the plastic Coca-Cola bottle he had used. The forensic laboratory extracted his deoxyribonucleic acid from the bottle and compared it to the male profile found on the bloody pillow from Nancy's bedroom. It was a perfect match. Armed with this definitive evidence, detectives Clinton Cole and Dave Agredano brought Fuentes Flores in for questioning. The interrogation, conducted in a quiet room at the Templeton substation, was a masterclass in interview technique. Initially, Fuentes Flores maintained his polite, cooperative facade, explaining his painting routine and denying any knowledge of Nancy's disappearance. But as the detectives systematically presented the evidence, showing him photographs of the property and revealing that they had his digital tracking data, his physical composure began to crumble. He fell into a chair, crying, and confessed that he had gone to the property. That night, he initially attempted to fabricate a story of an accident, claiming he had returned to retrieve a ladder and had accidentally struck Nancy with his truck, subsequently taking her inside to help her. But the detectives pressed further, pointing to the blood in the bedroom and the DNA on the pillow. Fuentes Flores finally broke, admitting that he had entered her home through the unlocked door with the sole intention of sexually assaulting her. When she resisted and attempted to call for help, he assaulted her, raped her, and ultimately smothered her with a pillow to prevent her from identifying him. The sacred soil. In a final, stunning moment of the interrogation, Fuentes Flores offered to lead the detectives to the location where he had left Nancy's body. The journey was a somber, silent drive eastward into the vast, desolate landscape of the Carrizo Plain, nearly an hour away from Paso Robles. The area was a sweeping expanse of dry grass and rugged terrain, a place where a body could remain hidden forever. As the search party walked through the dry brush, Fuentes Flores began to lose his orientation in the uniform landscape. But Detective Cole, scanning the ground, noticed a small, unnatural pile of rocks. Upon closer inspection, the grim reality was exposed. Nancy's skeletal remains lay scattered by wild animals, left out in the open wilderness without the dignity of a proper burial. Fuentes Flores fell to his knees, weeping, realizing the absolute finality of his actions. In January of 2022, rather than facing a highly publicized trial, Fuentes Flores entered a special legal agreement known as a slow plea. The prosecution presented the overwhelming evidence to the judge, who formally found him guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of rape and burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The persistence of justice. Both of these tragic narratives, though unfolding in different landscapes and under different circumstances, share a profound psychological commonality. They show us that the perpetrators of violent crimes are often individuals who believe they're the authors of their own destiny, possessing an arrogance that allows them to disregard the lives of others for their own personal gain or dark desires. Corey Richins believed that her status as a mother, an author, and a prominent businesswoman would protect her from the suspicion of law enforcement. She believed that by writing a children's book about grief, she could manipulate the emotions of her community and escape the consequences of a cold, calculated poisoning. Carlo Fuentes Flores believed that his polite demeanor, his hardworking reputation, and the remote nature of Paradise Ranch would allow him to commit a brutal assault and return to his normal family life without a trace. But both individuals underestimated the relentless dedication of the investigative forces and the power of modern forensic science, whether through the toxicological analysis of a single blood sample or the digital mapping of a global positioning system geofence. The truth was systematically uncovered. Justice, in these cases, is not merely a legal verdict. It is the restoration of order to communities that were shattered by violence. It is the quiet reassurance to the families of Eric Richins and Nancy Woodrum that they're loved. Ones are not forgotten, and that the individuals responsible for their suffering will spend the remainder of their days behind the cold concrete walls of a penitentiary. As we look back on these cases, we are reminded of the profound resilience of the human spirit. We see it in the three young boys of Eric Richins, who are now growing up surrounded by the love of their extended family. We see in Amanda, Nancy's daughter, who continues her mother's passion for horses, riding through the same golden hills of Paso Robles, carrying on a legacy of faith, love, and light that no shadow can ever truly extinguish. The veneer of normalcy and the pathology of deception. In the study of criminal psychology, one of the most compelling areas of observation is the concept of the mask of normalcy. To the casual observer, the communities we inhabit appear orderly, bound by shared values, mutual respect, and the quiet routines of daily life. Yet, beneath this tranquil surface, individuals occasionally exist who carry a profound disconnect between their public persona and their private actions. As a criminal psychology analyst and narrative chronicler of investigative work, I have often observed that the most complex cases are not those born of sudden, chaotic impulses, but rather those that involve a slow, deliberate calculation masked by an outward appearance of warmth, success, or quiet diligence. This analysis examines two distinct criminal investigations that took place in different parts of the United States of America, although separated by geography, the natural landscape, and the specific dynamics of the communities in which they occurred. These cases share a common thread. They both involve perpetrators who believed they could exploit the trust of those around them, commit grave offenses, and escape detection through the maintenance of a carefully constructed facade. In Utah, we encounter the story of Corey Richens, a woman whose ambition, financial distress, and romantic desires led to a calculated plan to end her husband's life, followed by an audaciously public attempt to capitalize on her grief. In California, we examine the disappearance of Nancy Woodrum, a beloved business owner and grandmother whose life was tragically cut short by a local tradesman, Carlo Fuentes Flores, a man who hid a dark, obsessive double life behind a reputation for polite, hardworking professionalism. By reconstructing these investigations, we can explore not only the tactical successes of the law enforcement officers who solved them, but also the deeper psychological mechanisms at play. We will examine how greed, narcissism, and compartmentalization drive individuals to commit acts of extreme selfishness, and how the meticulous application of forensic science, modern technology, and human empathy ultimately brings the truth to light. Part 1. The Mountain Heights of Betrayal. The setting is Summit County, Utah, a region known for its majestic, snow-capped peaks, its affluent mountain communities, and a lifestyle centered around outdoor recreation, family values, and entrepreneurial ambition. In this environment, Eric Richens and his wife, Corey Richens, appear to have built the quintessential American success story. Eric was a 40-year-old stonemason who had built a highly successful business, C&E Masonry, valued in the million. He was an athletic, outdoorsy, and deeply devoted father to their 3 young sons who were 10, 9, and 6 years of age. Corey, younger than her husband, was an ambitious woman who had transitioned from a stay-at-home mother into a highly active real estate investor and home flipper under her brand, K. Richens Realty. To the public, the Richens family lived an enviable life of luxury, filled with vacations, community involvement, and business growth. Yet on the night of March 3rd, 2022, this picture-perfect existence collapsed in a matter of hours. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning on March 4th, 2022, the silence of the mountain night was broken by a frantic call to 911. Corey Richens, speaking in a highly distressed voice, informed the emergency dispatcher that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. She was instructed by the dispatcher to begin cardiopulmonary resuscitation and to count out loud so that her efforts could be monitored. The rhythmic sounds of her counting 1, 2, 3, 4 echoed over the line as first responders rushed to the scene. When the paramedics, firefighters, and police officers arrived at the sprawling family residence, they found Eric Richins lying on his back on the floor of the master bedroom. He had no pulse, despite the immediate deployment of a cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine, which filled the room with a rhythmic, mechanical sound. It was quickly apparent that Eric was beyond saving. At 3:58 in the morning, he was officially declared dead. Furthermore, the responding medical personnel noted that Eric appeared to have been deceased for some time before the 911 call was placed, as his body had already begun to cool significantly. As the responding officers began their preliminary investigation, Corey offered an explanation for the evening's events. She stated that she and Eric had been celebrating a major financial success for her real estate business. Specifically, she had secured the contract to purchase a massive, unfinished luxury property known as the Midway Mansion for nearly $3 million. To celebrate, she had prepared a mixed alcoholic beverage, a Moscow Mule, which they drank in their bedroom before going to sleep. Corey explained that one of her young sons had woken up experiencing a night terror, which prompted her to go to the child's bedroom to comfort him. She claimed she fell asleep in her son's bed and did not wake up until approximately 3 o'clock in the morning. Upon returning to her own bedroom, she said she reached out to touch her husband, realized he was cold and unresponsive, and immediately placed the emergency call. When questioned about Eric's health, Corey and her mother, Lisa Darden, who arrived shortly after the police, suggested several possibilities. They mentioned that Eric suffered from Lyme disease, which he had contracted during a hunting trip and received weekly allergy shots. Corey also noted that he occasionally consumed tetrahydrocannabinol gummies to help him sleep, though she was unsure if he had taken one that evening. Lisa Darden added that Eric had looked unusually pale and unwell the day before, mentioning that he had complained of chest pains. However, as the emergency medical technicians and deputies worked in the bedroom, they observed details that did not easily align with a sudden, natural cardiac event. The paramedics noticed an unusual amount of blood coming from Eric's mouth during the chest compressions. This observation led to an early hypothesis among the first responders that Eric might have suffered a sudden, catastrophic internal hemorrhage or a ruptured brain aneurysm. Given Eric's young age, athletic condition, and the unexpected nature of his death, the county coroner's office was legally required to conduct a forensic autopsy. This decision marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would take years to fully unfold, revealing a stark contrast between Corey's public expressions of grief and the financial reality of her life. To understand the psychology of this case, one must examine the origins of the relationship between Eric and Corey. They met while Corey was working as a cashier at a newly opened Home Depot in Park City, Utah, which offered excellent pay for local workers. Eric, who frequently visited the store to purchase supplies for his masonry business, was drawn to her, and acquaintances recalled an immediate chemistry between them. However, their backgrounds and values differed significantly. Eric grew up in Bountiful, Utah, working on his family's cattle ranch in Summit County. He was a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, having served a 2-year mission in Mexico City, and he possessed a strong work ethic. His family valued stability, faith, and the outdoors. Corey, on the other hand, had grown up in a family that moved frequently due to her parents' work in construction. She had spent her youth cleaning the homes of wealthy residents in Park City and harbored a deep desire to achieve substantial wealth and status. When Corey became pregnant with their first child, the couple decided to marry. On the day of their backyard wedding, Eric's mother presented Corey with a prenuptial agreement. This agreement specified that Eric's stonemasonry, business, sea, and e-masonry was solely his property, and that Corey would have no claim to its assets or revenue unless Eric were to pass away while they were still married. Corey was deeply upset by this requirement, but she ultimately signed the document to proceed with the marriage. This prenuptial agreement would later be viewed by investigators as a critical piece of the puzzle, establishing a strong financial motive. Over the next several years, the couple had 3 boys in quick succession. Eric was a dedicated father, coaching soccer and spending his free time with his sons. His business flourished, bringing in millions of dollars and providing the family with a highly comfortable lifestyle, complete with luxury travel and expensive dining. However, Corey was not content to remain a stay-at-home mother. In 2019, she launched K. Richens Realty, entering the highly competitive world of home flipping. Initially, her business appeared highly successful. She posted videos on social media celebrating her transactions and quickly expanded her operations to manage 15 different renovation projects simultaneously. But behind the scenes, her financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. Corey was utilizing hard money, loans which carry high interest rates and short repayment terms, to fund her acquisitions. In 2020, Eric discovered that Corey had secretly taken out a $150,000 line of credit against their family home, which was solely owned by Eric. This discovery caused a severe rift in the marriage. Eric, realizing that his wife had forged his signature to secure the loan, consulted a divorce attorney. Although the couple chose to undergo marriage counseling and did not separate, Eric took a decisive step to protect his assets and his children. He secretly established a new estate plan, creating a trust that named his sister, Katie, as the executor and trustee and designated his 3 young sons as the sole beneficiaries of his assets, including the family home. He intentionally excluded Corey from the trust, ensuring that she could not access his wealth in the event of his death. As investigators would later discover, Corey's financial desperation grew significantly throughout 2021 and into early 2022. She was heavily indebted, owing millions of dollars to numerous lenders, and she was desperate to secure the Midway mansion, a high-risk property she believed would cement her status as a top-tier real estate developer. She desperately needed access to Eric's money to salvage her failing business and satisfy her creditors. Following Eric's death, Corey's immediate focus turned to his estate. The morning after a gathering at the home where friends and family had reminisced about Eric, Corey hired a locksmith to drill open the safe in the house, believing his will was stored inside. This action sparked a physical altercation with Eric's sister, Amy, who informed Corey that Eric had altered his estate plan and that the house and his assets belonged to the trust, not to her. Corey, in a rage, allegedly assaulted Amy, leading to her arrest and a subsequent conviction for assault. Despite this intense conflict, Corey quickly pivoted to a highly public campaign of self-preservation and promotion, asserting that she could find no suitable children's books to help her 3 sons process their grief. She claimed to have written a book titled, Are You With Me? The book, which she self-published with the assistance of a ghostwriter, was dedicated to her amazing husband. It featured a child asking if his deceased father was present during key moments, such as scoring a goal in a soccer game, followed by the father's reassuring spirit confirming his presence. In March of 2023, 1 year after Eric's death, Corey embarked on a promotional tour, appearing on local radio and television programs such as Good Things Utah. During these interviews, she presented herself as a vulnerable, courageous widow seeking to help other families navigate the trauma of sudden loss. Her performance was highly polished, earning her widespread sympathy from viewers. However, the criminal investigation into Eric's death had never ceased. When the toxicological analysis of Eric's blood was completed, the results were shocking. The cause of death was determined to be a massive overdose of fentanyl. Specifically, the level of the drug in his system was 5 times the lethal limit. Furthermore, the toxicology report identified the presence of acetyl fentanyl, a highly potent chemical variant associated with illicitly manufactured street drugs rather than medical-grade pharmaceuticals. This finding immediately transformed the case into a homicide investigation. Eric Richins had no history of drug abuse, and his family and friends were adamant that he would never knowingly consume fentanyl. Investigators from the Summit County Sheriff's Office, led by Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, began a meticulous review of Corey's electronic devices and financial transactions. A breakthrough occurred when the family's private investigator, who had been hired to look into Eric's suspicious death, uncovered a pattern of communication. On Corey's phone, investigators identified 3 primary contacts during the months leading up to and immediately following Eric's death. Eric, her mother, Lisa Darden, and a woman named Carmen Lauber. Carmen Lauber had a history of substance abuse and criminal involvement, and she had worked for Corey's family cleaning homes and properties. Believing Carmen was the source of the drugs, Detective O'Driscoll searched her trash, discovering drug paraphernalia that provided probable cause to obtain a search warrant for her residence. During the search, officers discovered a firearm, which Carmen was prohibited from possessing as a convicted felon, and a copy of Eric's obituary taped to her mirror. Faced with severe drug and weapon charges, Carmen chose to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed that Corey had asked her to procure strong pain medication for an investor who had suffered a back injury. Carmen stated that she purchased hydrocodone pills and delivered them to Corey. Shortly thereafter, Corey contacted her again, stating that the investor needed something stronger. Some of that Michael Jackson stuff, referring to fentanyl. Carmen admitted to purchasing illicit fentanyl pills from a dealer named Robert Crozier and delivering them to Corey on 2 separate occasions, once in February and again in late February, just days before Eric's death. The timing of these transactions aligned perfectly with a series of suspicious illnesses Eric had experienced. Investigators discovered that during a trip to Greece in 2019, Eric had become violently ill after drinking a beverage prepared by Corey, leading him to call his sister and express his fear that his wife had attempted to poison him. More recently, on Valentine's Day of 2022, Corey had purchased a bagel sandwich from a local diner and left it for Eric with a loving note. After taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric suffered a severe reaction, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine pen and a large dose of antihistamines. He texted a friend that day, stating, "You almost lost me this time. I think she might have poisoned me." The investigation also uncovered a romantic motive. Investigators discovered that Corey had been engaged in a long-term, secret affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. The two exchanged highly intimate text messages almost daily. In these messages, Corey expressed a deep desire to be with Josh, stating that she felt trapped in her marriage. In February of 2022, she sent a text message to Josh that read, "If he could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect." Just 48 hours before Eric's death, she sent another message urging Josh to hang in there until Friday, promising that life is going to be different, I promise. On May 8th, 2023, Corey Richins was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances with the intent to distribute. The arrest shocked the community, turning the self-proclaimed grieving author into a prime suspect in a cold-blooded murder. During her pretrial detention in the Summit County Jail, further evidence of her consciousness of guilt emerged. During a routine search of her cell, deputies discovered a handwritten, 4-page letter hidden in her mattress, commonly referred to as the walk the dog letter. In the letter, Corey instructed her mother to tell her brother, Ronnie, to testify that Eric had obtained pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico through ranch workers. This was a clear attempt to fabricate an alternative explanation for the source of the lethal drugs. The prosecution subsequently amended the charges to include attempted murder for the Valentine's Day poisoning incident along with multiple counts of mortgage, fraud, forgery, and insurance fraud, as they discovered she had taken out several life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge. The trial of Corey Richens was a highly publicized event. The prosecution, led by Brad Bloodworth, presented a comprehensive case detailing her massive financial debts, her calculated attempts to poison her husband, her secret affair, and the testimony of Carmen Lauber regarding the purchase of the fentanyl. The defense, led by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, argued that the prosecution's case was purely circumstantial, pointing out that no physical evidence of fentanyl had been found in the home during the initial search, and that the state could not prove exactly how the drug had entered Eric's system. They attacked the credibility of Carmen Lauber, portraying her as an active drug user who had fabricated her story to secure a favorable plea deal. A particularly dramatic moment occurred during the testimony of Josh Grossman, who wept on the stand as his private, intimate text messages with Corey were displayed for the courtroom. He recalled the conversation they had after Eric's death, in which Corey asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq and how it had made him feel. In a highly unusual move, after the prosecution rested its 13-day case, the defense chose to rest immediately without calling any witnesses or presenting any evidence of their own. They believed the prosecution had failed to meet its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury, consisting of 8 members, deliberated for just under 3 hours. On all counts, including aggravated murder and attempted murder, they returned a verdict of guilty. The swift verdict brought a profound sense of relief to Eric's family, who embraced outside the courthouse, declaring that justice had finally been served. Corey Richens, the woman who had sought to write her own narrative of grief and resilience, was exposed as the author of her husband's death. She faced a sentence of up to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while her 3 young sons, the true victims of this tragedy, were adopted by one of Eric's sisters to grow up in a stable, loving environment far removed from the calculated greed of their mother. Part 2. The Shadows of Paradise Ranch. We now travel several hundred miles to the west, to the central coast of California, where the rolling hills, golden grasslands, and majestic oak trees of Paso Robles define a landscape of serene beauty. Paso Robles, whose historical name El Paso de Robles translates to the Pass of the Oaks, is a peaceful community renowned for its world-class vineyards, agricultural heritage, and historic downtown. In this quiet region, 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum was a cherished fixture. Nancy was a highly talented hairstylist who owned and operated a popular downtown salon called The Strand. She was known for her exceptional warmth, her generous spirit, and her ability to connect deeply with everyone who sat in her chair. Her daughter, Amanda, shared her mother's passion for cosmetology, working alongside her and sharing a close, enduring bond. Nancy was also a deeply devout Jehovah's Witness. Her faith was central to her life, guiding her strong moral values and filling her with a hopeful belief in a future paradise on earth. Beyond her faith and her career, Nancy was an avid equestrian who found great peace and joy in riding her beloved horse, Montana, through the scenic foothills of the local area. In 2006, Nancy and her late husband, Robert, a local contractor, purchased a secluded, rustic property on El Faro Road. They worked tirelessly to remodel the estate, turning it into a beautiful retreat featuring a 2-story Victorian home with spacious wraparound porches and a majestic willow tree. They named the property Paradise Ranch, reflecting Nancy's spiritual hope. After Robert's sudden and tragic passing from a heart attack, Nancy lived alone on the property, eventually choosing to utilize the main Victorian home as a vacation rental while she resided in a cozy, converted studio apartment on the estate. In May of 2018, Nancy decided to sell Paradise Ranch. The maintenance of the large property had become overwhelming, and she wished to dedicate her time fully to her spiritual ministry, teaching others about the Bible. To prepare the home for sale, she had hired several local contractors, painters, and tradesmen to perform necessary repairs and renovations. On Friday, May 4th, 2018, a large wedding party consisting of more than 20 guests checked into Paradise Ranch to celebrate a vineyard wedding at a local winery. The bride and her bridesmaids were staying in the guest house and main Victorian home. Nancy welcomed them warmly, introducing herself and offering a hug before retiring to her studio apartment, which was separated from the main guest quarters by a single wall. The following morning, Saturday, May 5th, Amanda became deeply concerned when her mother failed to arrive for a scheduled Bible study. Such an absence was completely contrary to Nancy's disciplined and devoted nature. Amanda contacted her mother's neighbor, asking her to check on the apartment. When a neighbor arrived, she found a scene that was immediately alarming. The front door of Nancy's studio was wide open, the television was blaring, and Nancy was nowhere to be found. Amanda rushed to the property, and upon entering the apartment, her worst fears were realized. On the floor lay 2 large, dark stains that appeared to be blood. The sheets and bedding from Nancy's bed were missing, and the bedroom walls and headboard were marked with a fine pattern of blood spatter. On a bench near the door sat Nancy's purse, her car keys, her cell phone, and her iPad, indicating she had not left the home voluntarily. Amanda immediately called 911 to report her mother missing under highly suspicious circumstances. Senior Deputy Degnan and other officers from the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office arrived quickly at the scene. They were joined by Reserve Detective Clinton Cole, who was assigned to investigate the disappearance. From his first steps into the cottage, Detective Cole recognized that the space was a crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Nancy may have been surprised in her sleep, or had opened the door to someone she recognized. As the forensic team began documenting the scene, they noted several critical details. A beige pillow resting on the bed featured a significant blood stain, and upon closer inspection from atop a ladder, a forensic technician identified a faint, partial print of a hand within the blood. This suggested the pillow may have been used as a weapon to smother or suffocate the victim. The investigators swabbed the bloody handprint for foreign deoxyribonucleic acid and sent it to the state laboratory for urgent analysis. That evening, the investigation received a significant lead. Officers from the California Highway Patrol discovered a bundle of bedding and women's clothing discarded on the side of La Ponza Road, approximately 6 miles from Nancy's home. The items included a gingham print sheet that matched the remaining bedding in Nancy's room, a dress, a pair of shorts, and shirt. The clothing and bedding were heavily stained with blood. Amanda confirmed that the items belonged to her mother, solidifying the theory that Nancy had been severely injured and transported away from her home against her will. The presence of over 20 wedding guests on the property created a highly complex investigative challenge. These individuals had ready access to the estate and represented an immediate pool of potential suspects. Detective Cole and his team spent hours interviewing every guest, seeking to establish a detailed timeline of their movements. The wedding party had attended a rehearsal dinner at a local winery on Friday evening, returning to Paradise Ranch around 10:30 in the evening and retiring to bed by midnight. The bride, sleeping in the guest room directly adjacent to Nancy's apartment, had worn earplugs and reported hearing absolutely nothing during the night. One guest, however, initially raised suspicions due to his inconsistent statements regarding whether he had attended the dinner or remained alone on the property. When investigators attempted to follow up with him, he became defensive and uncooperative. Seeking to resolve this red flag, Detective Cole and his partner traveled to the man's residence in Northern California. Upon their arrival, the guest's attitude had changed. He was highly cooperative, provided photograph evidence confirming his presence at the rehearsal dinner, and voluntarily provided a deoxyribonucleic acid sample, which successfully cleared him of any involvement. With the wedding guests eliminated as suspects, investigators focused on the numerous contractors who had worked on the property. Amanda identified 2 individuals of interest. The first was Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had recently been fired by Nancy after a heated dispute over the quality of his work and outstanding payments. Bloom had threatened legal action, and his animosity toward Nancy was well documented in a series of tense text messages. The second individual was Carlo Fuentes Flores, a 38-year-old local painter who had spent several weeks painting the exterior decks and trim of the main Victorian home. When initially contacted by telephone, Fuentes Flores was highly polite and cooperative, expressing sadness over Nancy's disappearance and recalling her kindness in offering him homemade tamales while he worked. As the days passed without a breakthrough, the community grew anxious, and the family endured agonizing uncertainty. Search and rescue teams, utilizing helicopters, canine units, and ground searchers, scoured the rugged foothills and dry riverbeds surrounding El Faro Road, but found no trace of Nancy. A critical analytical breakthrough occurred when investigators examined Nancy's telephone records. They discovered that an attempted 911 call had been placed from her cell phone at exactly 12:17 in the morning on Saturday, May 5th. The call had lasted for 0 seconds, indicating it had been abruptly terminated or blocked almost immediately after dialing. This provided investigators with an exact time stamp of when the assault had occurred. Shortly thereafter, the State Crime Laboratory delivered 2 major pieces of information. First, the laboratory had isolated an unknown male deoxyribonucleic acid profile from the bloody handprint on Nancy's pillow. However, a search of the combined deoxyribonucleic acid index system returned no matches, meaning the perpetrator had no prior felony record. Second, Sean Bloom voluntarily provided his deoxyribonucleic acid, which did not match the profile on the pillow, officially clearing him of suspicion. Faced with a stalling investigation, the sheriff's office decided to deploy a highly sophisticated investigative technique, geofencing. This process involves securing a warrant to obtain anonymous location data from Google for any mobile devices that were active within a specific geographical boundary during a defined time frame. When the geofence data returned, investigators analyzed the coordinates surrounding Nancy's cottage. Amidst the devices belonging to the sleeping wedding guests, they identified a single mobile device that had pinged near Nancy's studio at 1:33 in the morning and again at 1:52 in the morning. Investigators secured a subsequent warrant to identify the subscriber associated with that device. The name returned was Carlo Fuentes Flores. This revelation shocked the investigators. Fuentes Flores was a family man with a wife and a young daughter, possessing no criminal record in either the United States of America or Mexico. He was widely regarded by his employers and clients as a quiet, tidy, and exceptionally polite professional. Yet, the electronic footprint placed him at the crime scene in the middle of the night. To understand his potential motive, investigators obtained a warrant for Fuentes Flores' Google search history and mobile phone contents. The digital analysis revealed a dark, deeply compartmentalized double life. Beneath his polite exterior, Fuentes Flores harbored an obsession with older women, frequently searching for cougar, pornography, and escorts. Furthermore, his phone contained numerous self-recorded videos of sexual encounters with various women, revealing a highly active, hidden lifestyle of excessive drinking and sexual exploitation. To secure an arrest, investigators needed to match his deoxyribonucleic acid to the profile on the bloody pillow without alerting him to their suspicion. A specialized surveillance team followed Fuentes Flores as he went about his daily routine. When he sat down for lunch with his wife at a local restaurant, an undercover officer watched as he drank from a glass bottle of Coca-Cola. As soon as the couple departed, the officer retrieved the discarded bottle from the table. The laboratory analysis was swift and conclusive. The deoxyribonucleic acid from the Coca-Cola bottle was an identical match to the profile found in the bloody handprint on Nancy's pillow. On the morning of the interrogation, Detective Cole and his partner, Dave, sat across from Carlo Fuentes Flores in a small interview room at the Templeton Sheriff's Station. They began by asking routine questions about his painting work at Paradise Ranch, prompting him to confirm his familiarity with the property and his interactions with Nancy. Fuentes Flores maintained his polite, cooperative demeanor, reiterating that he had only heard of her disappearance from his boss. When Detective Cole asked directly if he was involved in her disappearance, Fuentes Flores denied it calmly. At that moment, the detectives shifted their strategy, informing him that they possessed conclusive forensic evidence placing him in Nancy's bedroom on the night she vanished. The psychological shift was visible. Fuentes Flores' posture slumped, his breathing became shallow, and he confessed that he had made a mistake. However, he initially attempted to minimize his actions, fabricating a story that he had returned to the property in the middle of the night to retrieve a ladder for a job the next day. He claimed that as he was backing up his truck, he accidentally struck Nancy, who had walked up behind him in the dark. He claimed he carried her into her apartment to help her, where she subsequently collapsed and died. The detectives remained skeptical of this explanation, pointing out that an accidental collision would not account for the extensive blood spatter in the bedroom or the foreign deoxyribonucleic acid on her bedding. Under continued questioning, Fuentes Flores' narrative dissolved. He admitted that he had entered her apartment with the intent to assault her, believing she had been flirting with him when she offered him tamales. He admitted that he struck her to quiet her, raped her, and subsequently suffocated her with her pillow to prevent her from identifying him. In a surprising moment, Fuentes Flores offered to lead the detectives to Nancy's remains. He was placed in an unmarked police vehicle, directing a convoy of investigators east from Paso Robles toward the remote, arid landscape of the Carrizo Plain. The search in the fading light was difficult. Fuentes Flores struggled to identify the precise location in the vast, open terrain, stopping at several spots without success. Finally, as doubt began to creep in, Detective Cole noticed a small, unnatural mound of rocks off the side of the dirt road. Upon approaching the rocks, investigators discovered Nancy's skeletal remains, which had been significantly scattered by wild animals. The sight of her remains, left in the cold wilderness, brought a profound sadness to the search team, contrasted by anger at the callousness of her killer. Fuentes Flores fell to his knees weeping and asking the detectives to tell his young daughter that he was sorry for his mistake. Upon returning to the station, Fuentes Flores wrote a formal letter of apology to Nancy's family, and he was officially charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances of rape and burglary. While in jail awaiting trial, Fuentes Flores maintained a plea of not guilty. His defense team launched a vigorous effort to suppress his recorded confession, arguing that because he was a native Spanish speaker, his Miranda warnings should have been administered in Spanish, despite his fluent English. Conversation during the interrogation and in recorded phone calls with his wife. From jail. Following a detailed hearing, the judge denied the motion, ruling that the detectives had fully respected his constitutional rights and that he had clearly understood and waived them. Faced with the prospect of a trial and the potential for a death sentence, Fuentes